Welcome to the Milford School Committee meeting of September 20th. The first item on our agenda is the approval of minutes. We have several sets of minutes to approve. The first are the minutes of the July 19th regular meeting and the executive session of the school committee meeting. If I could have a motion from Dawn, a second from Christine. All in favor? Opposed? It's 5 in favor, so it's unanimous for those members who are here. The second set of minutes I'd like to approve are from the August 30 special school committee meeting for the purpose of discussing the superintendent's evaluation. If I could have a motion from Scott, a second from Rob. All in favor? Opposed? It's 5 in favor. The next item on our agenda are announcements, correspondence, and distribution. Did any member have any announcements, correspondence, or anything to distribute?
Just from an announcement perspective, had an opportunity this week to attend a couple of the back-to-school nights for both Woodland Elementary as well as Stacy last week. Just really what an amazing job. We had an opportunity, obviously, in the first day of school to walk through and tour the schools. The energy and the excitement from the teachers on the first day of school is obviously carried through for this first month. It continues to impress me to see the passion that these teachers bring, and it's kind of neat to be able to see what they bring to these kids and how they bring it and then show it to the adults. So certainly kudos to the principals as well as all of the teachers and faculty and staff that I know put in that extra effort for that night. They've got a lot to cover in a very short period of time, and I think the students in many cases have a much better attention span than the parents when they're in there. So myself obviously included in that. So kudos. It was great to see all the great participation.
That's great. That's great. Any other member?
Just for an announcement, tomorrow, actually, we're excited to announce that Brookside Elementary School and Milford High School have been awarded funding from the NFL Fuel Up to Play 60 grant, sponsored by the National Dairy Council. This is very consistent with all of our health initiatives going on in the district. So our kickoff event is tomorrow at 1 o'clock on the football field. If you have the opportunity to drive by or come by and visit, high school band and our mascot will be present along with Brookside students and staff. And from Mrs. Dagnes, wanted to extend an invitation to Mrs. Pinto and Mrs. Tuttle to the school committee
And that's a
tonight.
national program, I believe.
It is a
I think
national.
Some of us have probably seen the commercials on television where
That's
the
right.
students are participating in that, so.
It's great.
That's terrific.
I was just informed also today, I don't have all the details this evening, but it sounds like the National Public Radio, NPR, wants to come in and do some visit with us about some of our programs, our AP programs at Milford High School. So we're starting to get some notoriety out there, and it's nice to be able to share those positive stories with the committee and the community. So thanks.
Can I ask
So
a
if you-
question on that program? Did
For
each
tomorrow?
school individually apply the Healthy Initiative program? Did the school individually apply? Because I'm always, Brookside got it, why doesn't Memorial have it?
Oh, yeah,
Woodland
well,
didn't get
you
it,
know, I think at the time when Mrs. Dagnes was at Brookside School and
Okay.
and leading that, but she included the high school
Okay.
in that, as she's done in the past. So I don't know the details of the grant in front of me, but all the schools are part of that.
Oh,
It was
okay.
submitted from Brookside School. Judy, at the time, at her capacity as a nurse there.
All right.
Okay, but we do include as much as the
Well,
school population as
because
we can.
we'll get that question.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I'll have to follow up with Judy and get
Okay.
you more details on that one. I'll make sure we
Please
make an
do.
announcement tomorrow, yeah.
And what is the format of the presentation tomorrow?
Yeah, it's more just a kind of a general assembly down in the field, and band will play. It's more like like a pep rally type of thing, just to celebrate this grant.
Good.
I had one. I was actually remiss last week. I also wanted to thank someone else or another team of people in the town on the first day of school. Scott Christofouli in the highway department. Spruce Street in front of the Stacy School is spectacular. It's been repaved over the course of the summer. Aside from all of the other terrific work that they've been doing all around town, which we've all seen, but that really caught my attention, and it really makes getting in and out of that street a lot easier. I live near that area, and I drive by there quite often, and so I meant to thank the highway department. The next item on our agenda is the invitation to speak. Did anyone come to address the committee tonight? I don't see anyone. So the next item on our agenda is our open meeting law presentation. We're very fortunate to have town council come with us tonight. I believe this was a presentation that you first conducted back in 2010 when the laws changed. And unfortunately, there weren't any members of the school department that were in attendance then. So we're very appreciative of you coming tonight to make this presentation for us.
No, I'm happy to do it, and I think it's important. Yeah, we did this when the law first went into effect just about 2 years ago now, and had a presentation town-wide. Then I did one for the Finance Committee specifically, and then actually for the Blackstone Valley Regional School Committee. But it's going to be good for you folks, too. Some of you, are going to have some questions that apply to this. There'll be some things that are new to you. Aspects of it won't apply, but I want to go through the whole presentation, and I'll go over it in some detail. Maybe we can save questions, unless it's something really crucial, to the end, and we can, talk about it in more detail. But I've got a PowerPoint presentation, which might not be the best visual for the committee members. I see that now with that gray background, but there it is. And what I'll do is, tomorrow I'll email it to all of you, so you'll have it, and you can print it and use it for reference. It can be, I think, a pretty good reference. But the new law, Chapter 28 of the Acts of 2009, referred to as an ethics law, did a number of things. Changes in the open meeting law, it made some changes to the public records, which we're not going to really talk about tonight. Changes in the conflict of interest law were part of this too, including some significant new fines and new powers involved there. But again, we're not talking about that tonight too. There's aspects in dealing with lobbying, but we're here about the open meeting law portion of it, which is very important to this committee, both in terms of your operations at your meetings, before your meetings, after your meetings, and a lot of your personal interactions during the course of any year. Very, very important. So, again, as you know, it was effective July 1st, 2010. Just some broad overview here. It has effects on your ability to appear before other boards and committees. We'll go over that in some detail as we go through this. Very important, there were very new notice and posting requirements, which I know your administration has tried to be in compliance with, I think is generally in compliance with, but there may be some areas you'll see where there can be some tweaking to perfect that have come up in recent times. There's obviously have been very significant changes from the prior law in the conduct of meetings. New duties for the chairman, things that the chairman has to do during the course of each meeting, particularly in relation to executive sessions, duties the chairman has in terms of setting the agenda that are more strenuous than there were before. There's also a lot now that has to be done in terms of minutes and document retention that didn't exist before, that I know you may be doing some of it, but perhaps not all of it, and it would be important to bring it up to speed. But to get down to some of the important aspects of the changes, key definition, and a very significant one under the old law, which is on the right, becomes very important as to whether or not there's a deliberation, whether or not there's a deliberation between members, whether or not it's a violation of the open meeting law. And the definition as it was before is just as you see it there. It was a verbal exchange, and just verbal is what it said before, between a quorum of members of a governmental body attempting to arrive at a decision on any public business within its jurisdiction. That's what it was for 30 years before these recent changes. We used to use this in terms of, when I say we, town council, city solicitors, the language was limited, so it gave us a lot of options in terms of defending situations where members were accused of or claimed to have been involved in some sort of serial communications that were alleged to have been a violation. This definition gave us some flexibility there, but properly so. The new law takes away some of that flexibility, but provides a lot of clarity that wasn't there before. Now it's an oral or written communication. Now that's going to include both email, it's going to include texting, and frankly, it probably includes Twitter messages are now going to come under the open meeting law as a method of communication, which was in question before. So through any medium, including electronic mail, between or among a quorum of a public body on any public business within its jurisdiction. So better definition now, one that we're going to be able to, in different situations, people that are talking about it, defending or prosecuting issues under this are going to be able to point to that and have a little bit more clarity. It's no longer just, we used to be able to defend saying, well, they weren't trying to arrive at a decision. That's not the issue anymore. If you're talking about a quorum, if you have a quorum that's talking about matters that within your jurisdiction, even if you're not trying to arrive at a decision, which is what it used to be, still potentially can be a violation. So much doubt that was beneficial, if you will, in terms of defending claims is gone now. So there's going to be more clarity. The Attorney General's office is going to be able to address things more directly with that new definition. Well, another good part of the definition is that they also spell out things that are clearly not deliberations. So that eliminates a lot of the concern and a lot of the disputes in the past. Very significantly, of course, it's the distribution of meeting agenda, scheduling information, or distribution of procedural matters that may be discussed at a meeting aren't going to be in any way viewed to be a deliberation. Before, there was a question as to whether or not that kind of communication among members would be a violation. But if one member now wants to simply, well, the chairman's sending out the agenda, the chairman's sending out data in preparation for the meeting, or members just sending out information without seeking a response or any reaction, is generally, not always, but generally going to be permissible. Because the key becomes that last bullet point there, provided that no opinion of a member is expressed. So if a member has data in the form of a chart that he or she wants to distribute, you do that. If you add to it your opinion that based on that we should be doing this, you're probably in violation. So the simple distribution is going to be okay. The expression of a position or seeking a position from others is going to be a problem. Again, that's good clarity that comes with the new law. I think it's helpful to everybody. What this is, very difficult to read, and you'll have it when I give you the presentation. When I email to you the PowerPoint. This is directly from the Attorney General's guidelines, which were published and are still in effect, as to what constitutes a deliberation. And although I know you can't really read it right there, it backs up what I just said, provides a little more data, and it gives you very importantly, the Attorney General's viewpoint on this, which and they're now, as we'll see, the uniform enforcement authority. It used to be spread among all the district attorneys. Now it's just the Attorney General's office. So again, it's extremely helpful. The new definition of deliberation and these guidelines really go a long way, I think, to help the members understand the limits on what you can do between and among members. Another aspect that's very important, aside from deliberation, is whether or not, what's a meeting? Well, as you can see through this, it's any corporal convening and deliberation of a governmental body. So just the fact that four of you happen to run each other on the street, that's not going to be that's nothing. So it's a convening and a deliberation of a governmental body for which a quorum is required in order to make a decision, as it goes on to say. It's going to be matters that are under your supervision, control, or jurisdiction, or advisory power. It's whether discussed or considered. Now, very importantly, it does not include any on-site inspection of a project or program. That's very important to other bodies, in particular zoning boards that may go do site visits. Selectmen frequently do site visits. School committee, I suppose, in some circumstances may do that. You may visit a school. You may visit a school under construction. You may actually just have a visit to a school. That's generally going to be okay. That may not have to be a posted meeting if you're just going to visit opening day of the school or something like that. So there are a lot of things that before there was a question as to whether or not you were in violation by doing that without a posted meeting. Now there'll be some clarity that you can do these things without that. A little further on the meeting definition, as it's defined, a deliberation by a public body with respect to any matter within the body's jurisdiction. But then the exclusions, again, the on-site inspection. B, very important, attendance by a quorum of a public body at a public or private gathering, including a conference or training, so long as the members do not deliberate. Private gathering in Milford, obviously graduation parties are very important. And I've seldom been to one that, frankly, a majority of the school committee hasn't been at the same time or coming and going. There used to legitimately be a question as to whether or not that was a violation. Again, just going to the gathering and having social conversation and all of that, not an issue. If, 4 school committee members go to a graduation party and have a discussion on some school business, then you've potentially now created a violation. But it used to be a question as to whether you could go at all. Now that's been eliminated with the new law. Another exception, again, attendance by a quorum of a public body, school committee, at a meeting of another public body, as long as where that other public body has complied with the requirements of the open meeting law. And the common one's going to be the finance committee. Many's the time I've seen a majority of the school committee and the finance committee in the past discussing school business. Frankly, in the past, before 2 years ago, that may well have been a violation unless it was a posted meeting. Now, the legislature has eliminated that consideration. As long as that body that you're before has a posted meeting, generally going to be the finance committee, and you're there discussing with the finance committee, but not deliberating, but discussing with them the business, then you're not going to have to post it separately. It's not going to be a separate school committee meeting. It won't be a violation. And that's going to be very helpful because that's one of the more common violations, if you will, for lack of a better phrase, that used to go on in the past. D doesn't really affect you folks. It's a provision in there that quasi-judicial bodies or commissions can actually don't have to comply. That's going to be eliminated because nobody understands how that got in there. That might arguably apply to zoning boards or others, but my understanding there's legislation that's going to eliminate that altogether. E is a very important one, town meeting. You'll always see the Board of Selectmen sitting up front of a town meeting. In the past, again, often they've posted that as a selectmen meeting. At times they haven't. When they haven't done that in the past, there's probably been a technical violation. That's not the case anymore. Many of the time I've seen the school committee obviously gather at a town meeting as a group in preparation for the meeting. And in the past, again, arguably a violation, that's been eliminated now. As long as at a town meeting, the school committee's there on school committee business, it's not going to be a problem. Definition of a public body. This becomes important to you folks, not through some of the detail that's in here, questions of whether or not the geriatric authority or others are public bodies, but I think the important consideration for you folks here has to do with subcommittees. I think you're aware that in the past, subcommittees had to comply with the law, and a subcommittee meeting, whether it's 2 people, 3 people, whatever the number is, a subcommittee of the school committee has to do its business at a posted meeting. So if you've got a 2-person subcommittee, and I know you do, I think it's, in the past, I know there's been, maybe a common practice not to treat it as a meeting, not to post it, but that's got to be done. Obviously, any of your subcommittees. Subcommittees that you may appoint of people from the outside. If they're appointed subcommittees by the school committee to report to the school committee, those groups are going to have to post their meetings, they're going to have to keep minutes and do everything that's required by the open meeting law. I don't know whether that's done commonly now or not. I expect a degree of that is done, because I've had communications over the years. This isn't really new, but it's important that it be done, and I know it's one that's easily forgotten by subcommittee groups. And looking at that last bullet point there, subcommittee shall include any multi-member body created to advise or make recommendations to a public body. So again, whether it's a subcommittee of your group, whether it's a subcommittee of parents that you put together to advise, they're going to have to comply with the open meeting law. Question that nobody's really decided yet is what they call singletary committees. If the superintendent, just on his own, appoints an ad hoc group to advise him, one school of thought is that does not have to comply with the open meeting law, because that's not reporting back to a public body, it's reporting to the superintendent. So the better school of thought are those kinds of advisory groups to an individual that's not part of a committee wouldn't have to comply.
Chair, can I just interrupt you for a
Sure.
question? I asked principals to post other school council meetings, for example. Is that?
School council, yes, they should.
Okay.
They should.
So going forward, that should still be.
That's a body that's defined by statute, it's created by statute or authorized by statute, so those should continue to be. But again, the example of one that wouldn't, at least under my view, would be if you had created a group of 5 people to advise you on some issue, that wouldn't have to be posted. This is just a little bit more of what we just talked about in the prior law in terms of attending other boards and meetings. The second bullet point there, under the new law, it's not a meeting if a quorum appears at another board's properly posted meeting, so long as the visiting members communicate only by open participation on matters and do not deliberate. So you're at a finance committee, you're meeting, you're exchanging with the finance committee over the issue that's before the finance committee, but you don't go off to the side to discuss other issues of school committee business. So you keep it to the issues that are before that particular body. Now, very important, new notice and posting requirements, which I think you're generally in compliance with. Part of what's new here is the notice itself is the 48 hours is the same, but it no longer includes Saturdays, so now Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays are out, but I know your administration is well aware of that and has not been a problem for you. Very important one, the second bullet point, we'll talk about it some more too. The chairman, who's responsible for it, must list in the notice matters the chair, in the words of the statute, reasonably anticipates will be discussed at the meeting. And I know you're making an effort to do that, and I know you've made an effort to do that all along. One thing you got to remember is sometimes a member may have something they want to bring up. If they really know there's something they want to bring it up, they should communicate with the chairman and get on the agenda. Because it can be viewed if a member or other members know it's going to come up, even though the chairman isn't responsible still. Members know, and it should be on the agenda if it's a matter that's serious and should be there. Emergency meetings,
Quick question on
Sure.
that, Jerry. So, we always have new business listed
Right.
on our agenda.
Yeah.
I mean, it would seem to me then, correct me if I'm wrong, that nothing should be brought up there?
no, I don't think that's the case. But I think if you've got an issue that's significant, you want to bring up an issue of, I don't know, I'll make something up, the assistant superintendent's position. One member or two members want to do that, and the chairman doesn't know that's going to happen. You should let the chairman know. You shouldn't hold that for new business. Business should be generally for things that are of a more minor nature, less serious nature, and I think more typically should be brought up in the sense of new business that'll then be talked about briefly, but brought up at your next meeting. That, I think, is a good way to try to approach it. I mean, again, if a member simply, if it comes to your mind at a meeting at the last minute, there hasn't been a chance to do that, that's fine. But if I, a member, know, a week ahead of time that I've got something I want to bring up, I really ought to let the chairman know that and try to get it on the agenda, is the best approach. And again, the concept of an emergency, I've in the past heard reference, we're going to have an emergency meeting. Well, an emergency meeting, the word sudden is a very important word. It's got to be a sudden, generally unexpected occurrence, a set of circumstances demanding immediate attention. And those will happen. They will happen. There'll be issues that related to storm damage. There'll be some emergency issues. But I've seen that used, and I'm not saying by this committee in the past, incorrectly. Just in the emergency as well, we didn't think of it before, so now we're going to do it now. That's not an emergency. It's got to be something that's really reflects the word sudden in there. This really has more with the town clerk's end of this than yourselves, but there's been some difficulties with it. We've got it operating correctly because the new requirement is that the posting has to be conspicuously visible to the public at all hours in a municipal building. And now you'll see the new, 2 years old now, board that we have outside the town hall. Everything is posted there. There are options that the Attorney General could adopt, and they have adopted options in terms of website posting in addition to the board that we have. But the town has now, through the town clerk's office, we're in full compliance with this. So the setup we have, which is the posting in the town hall, the posting on the outside, is sufficient, and we're in good shape there. One thing that's supposed to be done at the beginning of every meeting, you may or may not do it, is announce at the beginning of the meeting if anyone's making a video or audio recording. And of course, there always is. Cable is always doing that, so you should be announced, even though it's kind of self-evident, but you're supposed to technically announce at the beginning of the meeting that the meeting is being recorded by, in this case, I guess, Milford MC2 or whatever, the Milford Community Media Center, Inc. Yes, right. And you also, and keep in mind, too, that any person can transmit the meeting through any medium, subject to the reasonable requirements of the chair. Person needs to notify the chair before that happens. So you literally could have somebody coming in, doing a video recording of your meeting. Nothing wrong with that, as long as they, obviously get notify the chair and comply with the chair's reasonable requirements. So they don't interfere with the operations of the meeting. The last bullet point, still the same as under the old law. At any public meeting, still need the permission of the chair to speak. People often don't understand, but there is no right to speak at any meeting, public meeting, with certain exceptions of statutory public hearings. But you need the permission of the chair to speak, and everything is supposed to go through the chair, or however the chair wants to operate it. Remote participation. I haven't heard this committee express a lot of interest in that, nor have I seen any interest town-wide. The Attorney General has just developed the new regulations dealing with remote participation. They've just been codified as I've cited them up there. First aspect of it is that it's got to be adopted by each community, including approval of the Chief Executive Officer. That's the Board of Selectmen. They haven't done it, not because they're against it. It simply hasn't come up. Nobody's thought about it. Nobody's brought it up. There certainly can be needs. There'll be times that you folks could be away on business and that you might want to or be able to participate remotely. It can be set up for that. You'll see the reasons for possible remote participation are given there in the statute and spelled out here: personal illness, disability, emergency, whatever that might be, military service, and geographic distance, which is probably the most common one. Somebody may be away on business, they want to participate, and it can be done if it's set up correctly and done correctly. And as I said, there must at all times be a quorum physically present, and there's got to be a full ability for members to be both present and remote to hear each other. So I don't think it's been, I know it hasn't been used in this community yet, but it certainly can be used. Don? Yep.
There were a couple of times when I first started where I was traveling and I asked if I could dial in remotely. So you're saying that is possible?
It's possible. Again, the first step, and maybe something your board to consider, whether you want to ask the Board of Selectmen to consider adopting it. That's the first thing that would have to be done. The Board of Selectmen would have to actually adopt it. Yeah, I have no reason to suspect they would be against it, but if you think that's going to happen, that might work, and it might be something that might be beneficial to this group. Then you have to follow the regulations, make sure everything is set up, and the most important thing is that everybody's got to be accessible to each other. So if Don's away at a business meeting and he's here, remotely participating, you got to be able to hear him, he's got to be able to hear all of you. So there may be some technical things that need to be set up to do that, but it maybe this board more than any others, it might be worthwhile to do that, frankly. So you might consider that, whether as a school committee you want to ask the selectmen to adopt it and start that process on.
Jerry, do you adopt it every time you
No.
meet?
The
So once
no,
it's
selectmen-
adopted, it's adopted.
Once it's adopted, then you've got to follow the process after that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see. Executive sessions, obviously a very important topic. There's a lot of new requirements in terms of getting into executive session. The reasons under the law haven't changed. There's still the 10 reasons. And again, they're the same as they were before. You operate under certain ones on a regular basis, others you never operate on. Important to keep in mind, and I've heard other groups, not the school committee, well, we're going to go to executive session to discuss personalities. Well, that's not there. There never has been there. Personalities is not a reason for executive session. Or I've actually known of boards to go into executive session to discuss professional competence of an individual. Well, that's actually totally antithetical. The statute says one thing you can't go into executive session for is discuss professional competence. But the reasons there, exemption 1, to discuss health, reputation, character, and exemption 2, which has to do with charges, et cetera, are still there, but there's new rights that are provided to the individuals, including the right of the individual who may be the subject of the discussion and have the right to the 48 hours notice. That's still there. They now, and the same rights to be represented by counsel, but they actually now have a right to make an independent record. So you could have a hearing on some charges against somebody, but they've got a right to executive session. They've got a right to bring in a stenographer and make a record. That will happen on occasion, I suppose. Very importantly, the third bullet point, the chair needs to state the purpose of the executive session, and as it states, all subjects which may be revealed without compromising the purpose for which the executive session was called. This is one that you'll frequently see not done fully, and I'm not saying by this, you folks may well do it fully. Others don't. Sometimes they'll go into executive session for collective bargaining. That was enough in the past. Now, if you're going to go into executive session, as you will tonight, to discuss collective bargaining issues related to the Teachers Association, you have to say that. So it's got to include that reference. You're going to go discuss executive session to discuss strategy in relation to bargaining with the Teachers Association or with the AFSCME group representing the cafeteria workers. You actually have to identify that now, where you didn't have to do that in the past. So that's some more detail that needs to be in there. And it's also on collective bargaining, real estate, which you're not going to do very often, litigation, which you won't do very often, but can happen. The chair needs to make a statement with that as to whether or not an open session would be detrimental to the position of the community. Collective bargaining, that's an absolute. You still have to make that statement, but I can't imagine a situation where that wouldn't be the case. You're going to go into executive session to discuss strategy in relation to bargaining. Open session will always be detrimental. But that actually has to be part of the statement the chairman has to make. Can best be included, as I suggest in that practice tip, in the motion itself. And it might be helpful to you almost to have the motions prepared in advance. It can be, I move to go into executive session to discuss collective bargaining in relation to the Milford Teachers Association, and I ask that the chairman declare that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect upon the bargaining position of the body, and we're going to or not going to reconvene an open session, so that can all be part of the motion. Then the chairman doesn't have to be bothered with saying anything once it's voted. So you might even think, Bob, about having some of these motions almost prepared in advance for a member to make, a second and a vote, and the chairman doesn't have to sit there thinking about, should I do it? Do I need to do it now? Do I need to say this? Because you're going to know in every case, whether that's going to be the case or not. And again, collective bargaining, I can't imagine. Frankly, in some situations, grievances and whatnot, the union has an absolute right to executive session. So not gonna be many situations, but there might be some in terms of real estate, if you ever get involved in real estate discussions, where frankly, an open session wouldn't have a detrimental effect, and so you shouldn't be there, even though others you might be able to. Again, back to what we already talked about once already, the chairman's got to, list matters which he reasonably anticipates being discussed at the meetings. One of the intent of the law is that there be more detail in terms of your postings than, and I'm not saying than yours were in the past, but generally, postings by municipal government were very bare bones in the past, and part of the goal of the law is to get more out in the postings, more detail as to what's going to happen, more detail as to the topics. And I think you're doing more than you did in the past, and you're probably in the right direction. Maybe it deserves review again. And I think this notice, this practice tip in terms of the notice that I suggest in here that be included in the posting, you already do that. I'm pretty sure you've got that verbatim in there now. And again, in terms of the various things that the chairman is supposed to state, and I know in some instances I've looked at your minutes, they haven't been there. You really want to have that in your minutes. So if you're not going to reconvene in open session, you have to announce that. It should be in the minutes. If you are going to reconvene, that should be announced. That it should part of the motion should be out there. Whether or not there's a detrimental effect should be in there if the chairman's making that statement or if it's part of the motion. Whether or not you're going to reconvene in open session ought to be there, and of course the roll call vote has to be there. That all that should be recorded in the minutes with some specificity. We've been over some of this. That's you got to announce at the beginning of the meeting whether there's going to be audio or video recording. And we've actually been over this too. You always got to state whether the body's returning to open session or not. I've seen that failure on other boards across town at times, not making that statement. And but you've got to state it. If you're not going to come into open session, you say so. If you are going to come back to open session, you've got to say so. It's an easy one to forget, and I've seen that happen a lot. But it's important to do this. And again, it'd be very helpful you have that reminder in the motion. And on this next one, you'll see in that second bullet, for reasons 3, 6, and 8, again, 3 is collective bargaining, 6 is real estate. I think 8 is litigation. There's again another example of the kind of motion that you could use. And I think, again, if you get into the habit of doing that, a lot of things will flow much more easily. Other new duties of the chair, again, they can be done by others, but they're called the duties of the chairs. One thing you're supposed to be doing with the minutes now, and I know with this body, there are a lot of documents that flow around from the administration, from school committee members, sometimes from the public. The minutes have to include a list of all the documents that are used at the meeting, which can be a problem, can be a lot of work, but your minutes actually have to list the documents that were actually utilized, presented, and whatever utilized means, and there are debates about that. But you got to try to list everything that comes before the committee in the meeting, obviously. You're almost going to have to have copies of the documents available, and you don't have to travel with the minutes, but you're going to have them available. So if you don't do it now, you really want to be having a file in every meeting. So it may be a thick file, but every meeting, these are your minutes, and these are all the documents that were utilized there, because people have a right to come in and request those documents, with the exception of those that won't be public, but, and that'll happen on more than a few occasions.
Jerry, did you stop you for 1 second?
Sure.
How long do you have to keep those documents?
It's going to vary depending what the documents are, but a rule of thumb is going to be 7 years, frankly. Some are permanent. I've just been putting stuff up, and I've been here 33 years, and I don't think I've ever thrown a document away. It's not worth doing it. As soon as you throw it away, you're looking for it. The minute you throw it away, you're looking for it. So there have been a lot that I can dispose of. The last week I put like 30 boxes upstairs in the town hall. They're there, listed. I know we can find what's in there if we have to, and 10 years from now, somebody will have to. But 7 years generally is going to be the case. Some you've got to keep permanently. Some you can, with permissions and detailed processes through the supervisor of public records, you can get rid of earlier. But there literally is a process you have to follow. To do that, there's a publication of the supervisor in public records listing the timeframes you have to keep documents. So it's all available online. It might be worth a review,
Jerry, if on the cover sheet, for example, for an agenda item which is posted, and we include and reference the enclosures, and the enclosures are in the file for the meeting, we still have to list in the minutes those distributions?
Has to have that listing of, these are the documents that were presented or came before the committee that night, yeah. You know, again, examples of some documents that will never become public would be discussions of employees' health situations, student issues, or where, you know, there's identification of the students, the typical kinds of complaints, many of them, not all, but many that will come up in executive session. Much collective bargaining discussion actually never becomes public, but others will, and that becomes important. We'll skip through this because you got to review minutes at reasonable intervals, and I know that your superintendent has been doing this, and maybe doing it on a quarterly basis, which is what I'd suggest. On a quarterly basis, you should review all the executive session minutes, and happy to review them with me if that's necessary, to see which ones can be continued to have non-disclosure. And, you know, the goal should be, if possible, release them. And you're actually supposed to, at your next meeting, announce, after you've done your review, you're supposed to announce to the public and to the media, obviously, that you've been through the executive session minutes of these meetings, and these are now public. This one isn't, if that's the case. Not sure about that. Now, the minutes got to provide a summary of this discussion on each subject. That's a little variation on what used to be there before. It used to be thought that minutes could be just who was present and the votes that were taken. And a lot of boards and committees did that in the past, but now you've got to have a summary of the discussion on each subject. That's obviously not a verbatim record. I've seen it in minutes in other settings where Joe said this and Mary said this. That's not a good way to do minutes, in my view. I mean, a summary of the discussion isn't stating individual members' positions. Generally, it should be just that, a summary of the discussion. There may be instances where you quote members, but again, you try to keep it to just a summary if you can. But you have to have that now where you didn't have to have it in the past. And again, as we just discussed, the list of documents and exhibits used at the meeting has to be in there. And the documents that were used in an open session, not shielded. Sometimes in open sessions, you're actually using documents that aren't public. Evaluation materials in many situations aren't public, even though you're using them in open session. Employment application and materials may be used at an open session, but they're not necessarily public, so you've always got to make those distinctions when you can, and you'll be able to make those distinctions. And as we discussed, documents can still be subject to not disclosure. Attorney-client privilege documents can be still kept from disclosure. And these are just, again, other bullet points on some of the situations where there can be non-disclosure. No reason to linger on it. And again, as we've discussed, this is just going over the concept of used, and there's a debate about, well, you know, members of the public come in with documents. Well, sometimes you have them, sometimes you don't. Yeah, the essence of it is, I think you should really try to get the members of the public who are actually utilizing documents at your meetings to give the committee copies of the documents so they can be made part of the record. I mean, you can't always force people to do that, but you do your best. When there's applicants before you, that's going to be more on other boards or committees, but you're trying to get those documents from them if they've been used and discussed at the meeting, and make them part of the record. And make sure they're part of the listing. Again, the problems here are, again, that concept of getting people to leave the documents and keeping track of them, and then the storage problems, which just increase. There's no question about that. They've increased in the selectmen's level. What used to be a small meeting file has grown exponentially on the selectmen's side. I'm more familiar with that, and I'm sure that has been and will be the case on your side too. But that's what the law requires. This is just a general description of what we've already been over. They've got to be accurate. They've got to include the date, the time, and the place, the members present or absent, the summary discussion, the list of documents, and all of that. Most of this is not new, and I think most of this you do well, but it's worth a review of it to just see where you can improve it. Minutes, of course, they've got to be created and improved in a timely manner. I think you do that now from everything I can tell. They've got to be made available within 10 days, even if in draft form. And this comes up on occasion. I haven't seen it here, but I've seen it in other groups where the press or others will demand the minutes the next day. And if the minutes recorder has a draft available and done, then that draft itself is a public record, with the caveat that it's not the official minutes, but the document the minutes recorder has written down is public record. And again, the documents and exhibits used along with that are going to be public records in most cases, but again, not all. There'll be exceptions to that. That's just another review of what the chairman has to do, and really the chairman's designee. In this case, it's going to be the superintendent's responsibility on a practical level to review the minutes. You do that, and I think you do that well. And again, as it says in that last bullet point, you've got to announce it at the meeting, the next meeting, and make them available to the public, and really that's often going to be more the media. Enforcement process, this is a major change, and as I said in the beginning, one of the major changes in the law was consolidation of everything with the Attorney General's office. Up until 2 years ago, all these issues were handled by the district attorneys in the various districts, and you get different results depending on what district you're in and who the DA was at the time. And that was not necessarily viewed as a positive. You could have different results on the exact same issue in different districts. So it is probably a good thing that the Attorney General's office now has control on it. There's going to be uniformity. They're putting out a lot of good guidelines, a lot of good guidance is on their website. There's now for the first time a formal complaint process, and as you see, the first step that person or group making the complaint has to first complain to the body that they're complaining about. So to the Board of Selectmen if they're saying the Board of Selectmen violated, to the school committee if they're saying the school committee violated. And the goal is there to see if there's, often these kind of situations can be resolved amicably if it's done that way, as opposed to going right to law enforcement, if you will. When a complaint does come to the body, then the body's got required within 14 days to send it to the Attorney General's office and report any remedial action that's taken. And a lot of these things, there's remedial action that can be done right away, and what might have seemed like a serious issue really isn't. Then not less than 30 days after the complainant then may file, if they're not satisfied, a complaint with the Attorney General's office. My understanding anecdotally from contacts in the Attorney General's office, they think this is working rather well, and in a lot of communities these issues are being resolved before they fester and result in a formal complaint. Now, when the Attorney General, something comes before them, they've got to determine whether or not there's been a violation. They don't always hold a hearing, but they have to hold a hearing before they impose a civil penalty. If they find a violation, they've got to determine who is responsible and whether the violation was intentional or unintentional. Like they put in their guidance that the result of this kind of discussion makes it more likely when they find a violation to find it's intentional, because now you've been fully advised as to the law. So, that they're more likely in these kind of circumstances to find it intentional when there is a violation. So it's great care has to be taken. Upon a finding of a violation, there's a number of things the Attorney General can do. Obviously, they can compel immediate and future compliance. They can compel attendance at training sessions. They can nullify in whole or in part action that may be taken at a meeting. It's a new provision in there, with much fought over by my city solicitors and town councils to try to limit it, and we had some success because they were going to make the penalties harsher and be able to apply them against individuals. The penalty is going to be $1,000, and it's going to be against the public body and not against the individuals, which I think is a good thing. Very serious one in the, the fifth bullet point. One power that's in there now is to reinstate an employee without loss of compensation, seniority, tenure, or benefits if there was a violation of the open meeting law attendant upon that employee's termination or discipline. So it's one that's got to be looked at very carefully. It almost creates a new opportunity for employees to raise an issue that could result in reinstatement if a body has not followed the open meeting law carefully. So that's very important. And they can also compel minutes, et cetera, to be made public, and they can, in the words of the statute, prescribe other appropriate actions. So they've got a pretty broad range of powers right now. And again, anecdotally, generally other communities are pleased with the way this new Attorney General's division is handling it. They are being very fair. They're being firm as they have to be, but then they're putting out good guidance. And again, I think being generally very helpful. Let's see. There's a lot, as I indicated, on the Attorney General's website now in terms of advisory rulings that actually can be very helpful. I use them a lot. They provide a lot of good information. in combination with the Secretary of State's guidelines, the Ethics Commission guidelines. There's a lot of information that's available on the web right now in this field. And there's a lot of things that are still in the works in terms of this law, although 2 years old, is considered new in this realm, and there's a lot of things that are being done in terms of technical changes to adjust aspects of it, which is important, and I think they're going to fine-tune it. And I will, if there are developments that are, pertinent to this committee, I'll let you know as those come up. And as it says at the very end of it, at any point in time, anybody can contact me with any questions about it, and I'm happy to discuss any aspect of it. And Bob and I discuss aspects, the chairman and I discuss aspects at time, but again, any member who got a question on it, just always should feel free to get in touch with me. That's basically it, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions I can. If I can't, sometimes I may have to go check and do a little research, but I'll try to do that.
Any member have any questions? I had a couple that just popped up. So if we are going into executive session for the purpose of discussing contract negotiations with an individual, and we believe that discussion of those contracts in open session would be detrimental to the body, if we reach a conclusion and decide that we want to offer certain terms of a contract, would we need to vote on that offer in an open meeting before the contract was accepted, or no?
Once it's accepted, then you have to announce it, yes. But if you have a meeting and you're discussing whether or not to offer a contract to an assistant superintendent, whoever it is, you're discussing the terms, then you actually vote to make the offer, to authorize the chair to make that offer. That's not public yet, because it hasn't been accepted. Negotiations could continue, because that person, no, that's not good enough, I want to consider something else. So until you have a deal, you don't have to. Once you have a deal, that's got to be announced.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I had been requesting that the superintendent post a school committee meeting to run concurrently with any any finance committee sessions that we've been meeting at. But that seems now, from your presentation, that's not strictly necessary.
Not strictly necessary. If you want to take up other business, then it would be necessary. If if you're going to do something other than talk with the finance committee about the things that before the finance committee, you may have a side issue you want to discuss, you better post it if that's the case.
So if we're reacting to an agenda of the finance committee, then it's not deliberation of our body.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Approving a subcommittee meeting with, for example, the education subcommittee of the finance committee, and say representative members of the Milford School Committee, should we post those meetings? It falls into the subcommittee.
Well, if they have a posted educational subcommittee, and you have members of the school committee at that posted meeting, just to talk about the issues before that subcommittee, no, you don't have to post that. But you should check, make sure that they've posted, and I'm not saying they wouldn't, but I don't know what their practices are. Again, I've had a hard time over the 20-plus years that subcommittees have been known to have to post. To get subcommittees to do that can be very difficult. So I don't know, I hope they do it. They've been through this training 2 years ago, so I expect they do it, but you ought to check that to make sure.
Okay.
If a member of a subcommittee wants to come in and have a quick conversation with Bob, or did those things have to be posted?
No. If any school committee member wants to talk to Bob, not an issue, not a problem. Two school committee members see each other on the street, accidentally, have a discussion about that's not a problem. The serial communication, we didn't talk about that, is very important. I mean, two of you see each other out there and you talk about some business before, that's not a violation. But if you see Rob and you have a discussion, and then Rob sees Scott, and well, now you've got your violation in progress. It's called a serial communication. Same, whether that's oral or whether it's email, that's got to be avoided.
I'm just going on the point of the subcommittee, committees have to be posted.
Right.
So if I wanted to come in and meet with Rob Quinn to see the video thing.
Not an
that's
issue. You're not a
meeting.
subcommittee. You're not a subcommittee. If you have a facility subcommittee, 2 or 3 members, and those 2 or 3 members want to meet with Rob, you got to post that meeting.
All right.
So you have a two-member, for example, safety and security subcommittee has 2 representative members of the school committee and other school administrators. It's not a quorum of the committee, it's 2
Right.
members, but it still
But
be,
it's
should
still
be
a subcommittee.
posted.
A 2-member subcommittee is a
As you said
subcommittee,
there.
whether it's 2 or
Okay.
3. When you got 4, then you've got the full committee. So, yeah, subcommittee of 2 is a subcommittee.
Okay.
All right, and if I heard you correctly, when you're in that subcommittee, you can only talk about that topic and not other school matters?
If you've got a two-person subcommittee and you're gonna have a posted subcommittee meeting, you should be talking about the business of the subcommittee and not, other business. Because you haven't, you actually supposed to, when you post it, you're supposed to list the topics that are gonna be discussed. So we'll say you've got a safety and security subcommittee, and you list the topics that you're gonna be discussing at this subcommittee meeting in your posting. You can't then segue into a discussion of the superintendent's contract. So you're gonna limit it to the things that you've posted and listed as the potential topics, which I suppose could be the superintendent's contract. I'm not sure why a safety and subcommittee would list that, but if you listed that for discussion, I suppose you could. But that's not generally gonna happen.
So subcommittee size
Has to post. That's right, that's right. Yeah. It is a pain, and it's been the law actually for now 20-plus years since a decision of the Supreme Judicial Court of 20 years ago. And it is very difficult to, I think in the past, not now, but in the past it's probably honored only in the breach, and very seldom was it complied with. But I think there's greater compliance now. But it sounds like there maybe have been some thinking that two-person subcommittees didn't have to post. Yeah, regrettably, two-person subcommittees have to post and have an agenda and all of that.
Any other questions from members?
Well, if you have, anytime any of you have any questions, just give me a call. I will get this out by email to all of you, hopefully tomorrow. And Bob, you'll call me for executive session. It doesn't matter where I am. I'm available by cell phone. All right.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
So the next item on our agenda is the Mass Math and Science Initiative update. And, I think, Bob, would you like to speak to that?
Certainly. It's with regret, actually, this evening that I have this item on the agenda, and it's important that the committee be aware of it as it came up as a matter of good faith bargaining in the last round of contract negotiations. It was a side agreement. We talked about, this is the Math and Science Initiative, it was grant funding that would provide monies to the school and support to the school. And Milford was selected as a community based on its advanced placement program and the potential to have that program expand. What seems to be more, as the committee has heard in the past, of a perception of it being an elitist kind of a program to give more opportunities for students to be in AP courses. What came to my attention from the association was concerns about the recruitment tactics, if you will, allegedly that was used by MIMSI. It's the jargon term we use for Math Science Initiative, we call it MIMSI. In any event, what concerns me, to be perfectly honest, is the way it came was a matter, and it's within the association. Either the association or both the association and the school committee, either or, could agree to terminate the contract as part of the agreement with MIMSI. Again, it provided funding. In some of the funding promises weren't delivered upon by this organization because their fiduciaries didn't produce the money. So, for example, if there was student incentives of compensation or staff compensation, there's professional development training for teachers, opportunities for staff at the high school and at the middle school, growing down to the middle school, opportunities for staff members to have training in cohort groups and working with peers. And for some of our staff, this is very exciting work. And it seemed to me to produce, from the data we've seen, the results that students were, in fact, growing in our programs and succeeding in those rigorous programs in an AP program. I think my take on this is the reason for the association to want to withdraw and to vote to withdraw from the MIMSI grant was largely around recruitment tactics. At least that's what came to me. What concerns me, and I do want to be upfront with the committee on this, is there didn't seem to be an opportunity to dialogue along the way. And I tried to facilitate that in what is public, of course, and what I've shared with the committee. If you had a chance to see the chronology, I hope you saw in there that there was a concerted effort to bring a group of people together. I know a teacher in the room who was at those meetings, who came in and to find out what the problem was, to have an opportunity, if there was a recruitment issue or whatever it may be, to resolve it, like any of us would do in an issue where there's some debate. Let's try to resolve it. That didn't seem to me to be an opportunity that was presented to us. And we tried that on a couple of occasions. The director, Mort Orloff, was kind enough to come in as well, sit at this very room with staff members who were invited to share their perspective. And there was mixed feelings from staff, those who had the experience of this recruitment, of students feeling like they need to be pushed into this program, push. There's already so many things on these kids' plates was the argument. There's just too much. So you hear from both sides, and yet at the same time, there's an opportunity, and the data was proving out. I say all this as background information because I want the committee to know, from my perspective, that there was an effort to bring both sides, all sides of the table, together to have a conversation about it. In the end, despite the 3 attempts to seek some resolve, the association rendered this final vote of the membership. I don't believe, and I want to be emphatic here, I don't believe that this is necessarily everybody who voted one way or another was fully informed on the association side about what they were voting for. I really believe that to be true. And I believe there are problems that needed to be worked out. And my understanding from talking to Mort Orloff is that he was agreeable to those terms and working that out. What's regrettable is that we're not able to do that. At this point, we are, because of the contract language, because of the agreement, again, either side had the opportunity to say we're done, and so it has been spoken. That said, because our kids hang in the balance, and many of our staff who've relied on this professional development, I've committed, along with Kathy, to looking to find whatever funding source we can and to commit to that. So if we've promised our teachers the training they need to do their job successfully, to keep the rigor for the programs that we're offering, we'll make good on that promise. And we'll do that locally. It will be a challenge in some respects when the MIMSI grant, for example, covered AP tests, rather PSAT tests for all students in a grade level. That could be problematic now for us, which we may have to, look at student activity account money or whatever it may be to offset that. Now, granted, there are the other side to this. I'm trying to be really down the middle on this. If they were reducing the funds this year for PSATs, so we knew there's going to be an impact. And MIMSI did not deliver on its promise for the student rewards and the staff rewards. So there have been some letdowns on MIMSI's side. So I say all this because I want you to have the full perspective of it. It may not have been as clear in the documents that I provided to you, but that's just notice to the school committee, since this committee signed on that agreement, and you need to be notified by me that agreement is now terminated.
Any members have comments? Christine?
So my first understanding of this was from the school committee agenda, and I have to go on the record as saying I'm incredibly disappointed that this is how it was handled by the union. I think there was, from what I can see from the timeline, there was no open discussion. And whether recruitment, while I understand the premise of it, it seems the people who get hurt are the students. Because what we saw in the year that we had this was an increased participation of students, a larger number of AP courses, and we were reaching populations of kids that don't often have the opportunity to get an AP course, but guess what? They got that opportunity. So I find it hard. I'm not going to apologize because I'm not going to go down the middle here. I only see it from the education that we can provide these kids and the rigor a program like this could provide for our teachers. The professional development alone is wonderful. Never mind the Saturday programs that happened this year where students across districts met and studied and learned how to take the test. I don't know how you duplicate these. Nothing's perfect. But the opportunity to participate in the program, and maybe instead of walking away saying how we can make it better and how we can work with it, that's what I would have liked to have seen, some kind of dialogue. This was done over the summer. That disappoints me incredibly. We all know public education goes on hiatus in the summer. So the fact that this dialogue wasn't open in the summer is really disappointing. And I want to say the main points of MIMSI that, I went on the website, looked it up, and like, wait a minute, we talked about this. We made sure it was the right thing for our district to participate in. There have been other decisions we've made where people have raced to the top. We didn't participate in that. We make careful decisions. This was one that we all said, this is good for our district, and this is good for our schools. Now, like you said, MIMSI didn't come through with some things, but that doesn't mean some of the things they had in place weren't good, and it doesn't mean it doesn't pay off. And the things that I think that MIMSI offered that are also being said as negatives are advanced level content, focused training for teachers. Isn't that what we want our AP teachers to have? You can't just have an average math class, just, I'm gonna teach AP this year. You need to have a focused training on that, especially with our block schedule. The way the schedule is structured, you need to be able to focus your core time on that AP course. Another thing is the high expectations. There is nothing wrong with a culture of high expectations for all our students. And a program like this that talks about AP, that tries to provide a better structure for AP, I don't know where the bad in that is. The recruitment, work with whoever's in charge of MIMSI. Work with them to get that off the plate if that's the problem. But I'd like to hear from teachers who thought it was good and teachers who had problems with it, because I bet there are some great success stories too. And we weren't afforded that opportunity. I also have to say, a contract that says where both of us signed and one has the opportunity to renege on it is not fair to both parties at all. I mean, we both went into this contract. So I don't know how, it seems to me from the final letter is that all they do is quote that we tried it for a year, good, we tried it, a year is done, thank you. And I'm sorry if I sound biased, but I am really disappointed because I think that what this offers is what the high school needs. We should be above par on our advanced placements, and our school has struggled. And you didn't even give it an opportunity to see growth.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It was very disappointing, to say the least. You know, I read through the correspondences, and it was hard to discern what the issues were, and it didn't appear to me that the timeline that the correspondence was done in was really enough time to, you know, maybe try to work through that. And when you say recruitment, I don't understand what the problem with, I'm not following what that is or what the problem was with that, but certainly the benefits seem to have been there for our students, and I think the most important thing is the students in this.
I was pretty surprised when I saw this that, again, I'm not a professional educator. I work on this is not my chosen profession. But it perplexes me why we wouldn't choose to invest more to help all levels of students achieve their full potential, which is what this is designed to do, of all levels. In addition to, why wouldn't we invest in the development of our teachers even further, which is part of what this program did as well. So I guess it's extremely disappointing, and certainly would echo Christine and Rob's comments as well. Very disappointing.
Can I just say one more thing? And the recruitment piece, I don't understand it, but it would seem to me they're only going to recruit, if they're recruiting some of our teachers, then aren't they recruiting our teachers who have excelled in this program, who can deliver the message, and who can... It was
Yeah.
students into...
And then staff
In
feeling.
what way? Into AP courses?
The AP courses.
Oh, well, that, I mean,
Well, and staff members
don't
feeling,
understand that.
sincerely feeling that, and I don't dismiss those feelings, but they're sincerely feeling that many of the students, it was the same students, they're already overtaxed, taking a lot of AP courses as it is, they're tremendously stressed about that high level of achievement, and they felt passionately about that. So there was, again, it was a minority number of voices. It wasn't like we had a room full of people expressing these. Some staff members did share with me, but again, it was through their association that they rendered the vote. It was, as much as we tried to open the dialogue, it really kind of got stuck in a couple of...
dialogue in the summer.
Yeah, right, exactly, and you'll see in the correspondence that I
open
tried
dialogue. You
to encourage revisiting the concept, giving it more time, giving it a chance, really like you do in anything with a correction of any kind. You bring it to somebody's attention, you give that person an opportunity to correct it. If it's not corrected, then there's cause for us to say this is not working out. It seems to me that step did not occur, and I'm just not sure why. That never became clear to me either.
And can I ask, I'm sorry, Mike, I just want to finish one more thought. How many teachers came to that meeting that you had with the person in charge?
There
Of
was,
Mincy?
I don't know if you want to, was it maybe 8 or?
64 plus 14.
They voted, they didn't come.
6 of you, and I think the vote was,
80.
okay, and the vote was 64, the vote...
That was not the union meeting. This was the meeting.
This is
This
the,
meeting with to work it out with
Let's try to
Mincy,
work
but
it
I'm
out.
saying if you're going to vote no in favor of something so strongly, then that percentage is really, it's I'm very, very disappointed in how this was handled. Very disappointed. It does no service to the school.
What I heard say was, one of the reasons why it broke down was their breakdown in the compensation portion of this, is that correct?
One of the problems was MIMSI's funding. They depend on their stakeholder, their fiduciary group. And if they withdraw the money, there's no money to give out. So they did begin to pull away from some of the promises that were made at the outset. So if we're going to give, there was significant dialogue around the time that the terms were negotiated in terms of fairness or equity. For example, this only focuses on certain content areas. The school committee at the time voted a contract, terms of a contract that would provide opportunities for, those of you who negotiated that, for people who were not in this math, science, English language arts combination. So if you were teaching, psychology or something, you'd have opportunities available to you comparable to what's being offered or paid through the grant. So there was this parity of groups who were selected by MIMSI and groups that would not be. But because the MIMSI group never really was able to deliver on the promise of the compensation, which was a big topic of discussion in the first place, because once you start adding in performance rewards in public education, it opens up a whole different level of conversation. So in the end, that was problematic in terms of getting through the dialogue. It never really delivered on that promise of pay for performance. There was some student incentives that was paid out. But even now, some of that is backed off from MIMSI. They don't have the money to pay for the PSAT testing that they had in prior years. So,
Well, the reason why I'm asking is, if the compensation piece was still there, whether it was through MIMSI or other ways, would it have been approved? And therefore, keep the program intact for our kids?
I think there's a lot more to it than that. And honestly, and Mike, I'm sorry to step in front of you. I've made no, I haven't hidden the fact that AP courses and the way they're conducted in this high school have been a concern of mine since the day I've come on this board. And I've always been adamant that AP courses aren't simply another honors course that we teach in this building. That AP courses are actual courses that will give our students a leg up when they get to college. It's college level work that the students have an opportunity to take the test and pass the test and do well. And I think that MIMSI did a lot of very positive things to put us on that track. I think some things that we haven't even discussed in this meeting so far, and just so no one misunderstands where I'm going, I share in Christine's disappointment just as strongly. I think that what we were seeing through our participation in this MIMSI program was not only improvements in the high school, but we saw actions that were happening in the middle school to align the curriculum with the high school curriculum. So these students were starting an AP track in the 6th or 7th grade and were working in an aligned curriculum moving up towards the high school. And because of this MIMSI program and the participation in this MIMSI program, we had middle school teachers that were going to some of these funded events, that were taking these courses, that were understanding the high school curriculum, so they could align what they were teaching their students more completely with what these students were going to experience when they got to the high school. I've been very involved in this MIMSI for a while, and Mike, I asked you for a report, and you and Carrie and Mike McIntyre all worked on that for me back in March or April. And what I wanted to get was reactions from teachers who had participated in some of these professional development courses run by MIMSI, and how were those courses affecting the way they taught their classes. And across the board, I got nothing but positive reactions to the information that they gathered during these MIMSI events. I've spoken to several teachers who've participated in some of these MIMSI-funded professional developments, and they've all been effusive in their praise of how good they're. I mean, there's issues, but they all took something from this training back to their classroom, and they said, this makes a lot of sense. I understand the way that this works. And so what I see is, and I don't question the vote, I don't question the authority of the vote or the right of the vote to occur. What I have a real problem with is we have a vote that was taken that took funding away from our district, whether it was as great a funding as it was in years past or not. That funding is now gone. We have a vote that took away student resource, teacher professional development resources from the school district. And I consider both of those to be robbing students of resources, whether they be better trained teachers or funding for certain programs. And so whether we have to kick in part of the PSAT because they can't fund the whole thing, it's still something. And so, and I understand that they were undelivered, there was performance issues. You know, if you can perform, we can pay you. It didn't come through, I understand that. But that doesn't mean all the other funding that we received was neglected funding that didn't have any use. And what bothers me here is that we're now subtracting from what we had to offer our students. And now, because the teachers who participated in it believed in it and thought it was a good thing, Bob has to find a way to fund through our budget some of this professional development. And we're writing grants and we're trying to put some of this stuff back. I have spoken to middle school teachers. Oh, by the way, in terms of the contract, these middle school teachers who were aligning their curriculum with the high school, they had no say in this vote because the vote was among high school teachers only. They expressed disappointment in not being able to have their voices heard because they participated in some of this coursework. So, and Bob, I won't speak to what teachers did or didn't know. I know that you wanted to make it clear that there may have been access to information or there may have been misleading information, and I'm not putting words in your mouth. I don't know what that situation was. All I know, sitting here as a member of the school committee, is that we had a program that wasn't perfect, but was working, and now it's gone. And so, disappointment is not even the beginning of it. I just think this was a bad decision, and I wish it hadn't happened. I cut you off, Mike. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
You know, Patrick, almost to what you're saying, and not that I want to micromanage anybody, but how can you have a situation like this going on in a school, ultimately have a vote of 66 to 14, and we're finding out about it now? Maybe I missed something, but, you know.
because the association.
And I'm not trying to, please
Oh,
understand, I'm
no.
not trying to put anybody on the spot, but I'm just
No.
saying to myself, you know, not a letter, not a phone call, not a, you know, from the high school principal, you know, that this, I mean, if the vote was 55 to 50, it's, but 66 to 14, 66 people were flat out, this isn't coming back. There's a message in that vote, you know? And what is the message? What really, I think there's a lot more that broke down than what's being discussed, my opinion,
Okay,
you know?
there was a lot of effort put into, and as you know from the correspondence, to try to bring people back, because the vote, as you saw, was even taken before even any conversation happened. So there was efforts made over the July and August to bring back the conversation, and even at the last meeting was, we can talk, but we
Maybe I
voted.
misunderstand, and I'm sorry, I didn't pick up your last name, the teacher. And you said how many people were in,
The meeting in August, there were 6 of us here, sort of 3, 4, 3 against. Again, had it not been a summer, we may have had more people here.
right,
The meeting at which a vote was taken
it was 80.
was in June.
Is your hand in
And,
there?
there was a forum given beforehand for all teachers to speak and give their thoughts regarding these. I spoke briefly, I had a child in my room with extra help, and I left the child with a handful of problems, went down the hall, spoke for 5 minutes, and went right back. So I did not hear the extent of all the back and forth. But I understand that it was moderated and people were allowed to speak their piece, but they were not allowed to argue and debate and to get into bickering. Okay, fair enough. Votes taken up for this. My sense of it is that.
Using the microphone? Sorry.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Oh, sorry, I gotta turn here.
Sorry, go ahead. Is this better for you?
Yeah.
Sorry.
We're high tech now.
Okay, I'm not high-tech. In fact, he'll probably tell you I'm pretty
Can you
low-tech.
just clarify on the
but-
forum, was it Milford Teachers Association?
It was Milford Teachers Association. It was held in C8 right across the hall, and as I said, I left an extra help student and came down the hall and came back. And I think it was probably reasonably conducted as far as it went, but it was a vote among all of the teachers. And not all of the teachers participated in the program. So that where I think Mr. Tremblay is alluding to some misinformation is that the teachers that participate in the program certainly have firsthand experience of what went on, either good or bad, whatever their experience was. But there were other teachers who are learning through hearsay from the teachers that were participating, and that may have been hearing either me, negative, or something more positive. And thus, my sense of the meeting was, one, that it was premature, that we didn't have any AP scores in at that time on which to make we didn't have hard data as to whether or not the program had really improved anything one way or the other. We were really kind of relying on sort of gut feelings. And some of that was around the recruitment process. And there were certainly some teachers that felt that students had been overly encouraged to take APs, and perhaps they did not understand what they were getting themselves into.
Is that Minzy's fault, or is that our fault? You know, is that our guidance?
Again,
counselor, Minzy's
from my
fault?
perspective, I think that's a point we could tweak. I think it's something we could work on.
Right.
I don't know that that means we had to can it. But, I don't run the union, I don't run the way, so I gave my piece, and I've tried to speak up and be here because I do believe, I echo many of your own sentiments, that for my group of students, it was a very good experience.
And the students benefited from the interdistrict participation.
I benefited hugely.
Yeah.
From the interdistrict.
And the students participated as well.
Yes.
And the teachers participated.
Yes.
I mean, I think that kind of collaboration among districts is very exciting and it's very beneficial. That's the way professional development is going.
We had teachers that weren't in this building that were excited about Mimsy, that were teaching at lower
Yeah.
grade levels that were excited about
As you
this
noted,
program.
they did not get to participate in that vote.
That's right.
I was unaware of that.
Yeah.
It's
So
very
again,
tricky.
there are times when I kind of have my head stuck in the sand just with my own classroom,
Right.
and I lose the larger picture.
And all this
Appreciate it.
correspondence was an effort to
Thank you.
open that dialogue.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
What about another letter expressing the feelings of the school committee?
I could certainly, and I did ask Moore Orloff, as the principal knows, to say, I'm hopeful that the dialogue, that we can problem solve with you, can you be patient, not take the letter, the termination letter from the association as sort of the final word, can you just give us a little bit of time to work through it? Mort was agreeable at that time. He had to cash in a little political capital with his stakeholders to say, hold on to Milford, because they are interested in us. They are interested in Milford being part of this cohort. We're very attractive to that group. So certainly I can express the appreciation, the concern of the committee to the association and ask them to reconsider with all information made available. I'm happy to do that. We've tried that on several occasions, and I'm perfectly honest, one of the run-ins I had is, I felt, as Catherine and Mike can probably both attest, as I tried at the meeting, and it came out as, we've already decided you can have this meeting, but we've already decided, and that is not how I conduct business. But I am happy to make that third or fourth reach and express the concern of the committee. If that's what the committee so chooses.
I mean, I think to the public, I don't think you saw it coming or Mike saw it coming. It was just a teachers' meeting where you received this letter, correct?
That's correct,
So
yeah.
it wasn't any anticipation that you wouldn't.
That's why there's no.
You wouldn't have to know union business. I mean, they have their general meetings at the end of the year. And so there was no rev up to the fact that we're going to cancel this participation. Never mind, I've never heard anything, beginning of June, come on, the kids aren't even done yet. Let's see what happens. One thing this district has pushed, and even to Bob, is let's make data-based, data-driven decisions. I don't know what the data there is, except we didn't like certain things. There's lots of things I don't like about certain things, but you have to make sound decisions for our school and our students. And, there's lots of things that can be tweaked. I just find that I'm so disappointed.
I think we should even take it a step further, where if they're going to reject you a third time, I'd like to know the details around that decision.
I don't know if we can demand from the union an explanation, and I think that was, and Christine mentioned it briefly, and it's something that I certainly read as I read through the documentation, that, essentially the main explanation was, well, it's our right to do this, and so we're gonna do it. And that seemed to be the sum and total of the explanation, so I don't know that we have a right to demand from the union any further explanation than that. I certainly would like to hear some additional explanation, but I would, again, and I would hope that the passion of this committee about this particular matter might open up some people to maybe discussing it, and I certainly commit to not being judgmental or having a closed mind about it. I would certainly welcome discourse, should it come, and I think it would be important for the school district and for the students that we take care of on a daily basis to have that. So I would extend that invitation to the union, and even if it's a special meeting or however we want to do it. Again, there won't be any judgment, open discussion. I'm willing and want to hear the voices of everybody involved and what was wrong, and ultimately, and I'm perfectly happy to say this, I would much rather bring the program back with modifications so the teachers are happy with it, than just ditch it and decide that this isn't going to work for us, even though we never really gave it a shot to breathe. Right.
One thing that, I'm sitting here listening and just thinking about this. One thing that I've always loved about Milford, and we've always done such a great job, is the school committee, the administration, and the teachers. We've always worked together based on everything from back when I was a student here in Milford, to now being a parent of two teachers in Milford, of two students in Milford, and being the son of two teachers, retired school teachers in Milford. The school committee, the administration, and the teachers have always worked together for the benefit of the town, for the benefit of each other, and for the benefit of our children. This does not appear to have been that way. It appears almost as though it's we've made this decision, we've made it unilaterally, and we're not going to have any further discussion. So, to Mike's point, maybe there's something else in here with that 68-14 vote. I'd sure like to have a conversation and make sure that we are very clear, to Patrick's point, that, listen, if there's some bigger problems here, we'd love to know about it, because based on what limited information we have right now, we're feeling like there was a rug pulled out from underneath us, and the teachers were not feeling like this was the right program for them. So we want to support you. We want to be on the same page. We just want to get all the information so that we can continue to be on the same page and be on the same team and do the right thing for the teachers and for our children.
I'll certainly craft a letter that opens that dialogue invitation.
Yeah, please extend an invitation, and I'm hopeful, and I think everyone here is hopeful that something comes of it.
So unless any other questions or comments, that's all I have to report on that item.
The next item on our agenda is the educator evaluation process and procedures, and our public comments are sought. Did you want to preface this in any way, Bob? Or?
It's really, this is funny, to Mr. Harrison's earlier point. We have had very successful, and I hope that this is not indicative of something moving forward of a relationship. I hope it's really isolated to this, that we have had success working across the administration and the Teachers Association and the school committee. And one example of that is our evaluation process and procedures. We've adopted this. As the committee knows, this was not without a lot of work and a lot of subcommittee hours put into this. The purpose of this item on the agenda is to seek any public comment about the tool, the matrix, from anybody. We have to do that under the legal requirement. This has been a good process overall, providing training to the staff. I'm not surprised there's nobody here to comment on that, because it's really been vetted thoroughly throughout the process. This is the example. This, to me, is an example of where the dialogue happens and it's successful and you work through the problems. I have asked the staff repeatedly, as people who have been on my email thread in this room have seen, I've asked only for the staff's patience in going through this process. That I'll do everything we can to provide the training we need about this. It's very different. It's very involved. It's very complex for everybody at every level, including the school committee. And I've asked the staff for their patience in that process, and they've, for the most part, what I'm seeing so far is that everybody's on board with that. That's the kind of expectation that I'm used to in Milford, or the kind of conversations that I'm used to, working across the table. I'm disappointed with the prior topic because it's a departure from that, and I hope we can resolve that, and we'll certainly give it another attempt. But again, not to digress, this purpose of this is any public comment about the tool. Otherwise, I just think that we can just log it as having happened, having occurred.
So I can open an invitation to speak to any member of the public who wants to discuss the new evaluation process that we shall apply to teachers in the coming school year. Seeing no one. The next item on our agenda is the report of the superintendent of schools, in which we shall discuss the superintendent's self-assessment and the performance goals that you had drafted. And each member of the committee did receive these goals with their packet, so this shouldn't be something that anyone is seeing for the first time. And so that being said, Bob?
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if you want me to read the self-assessment for the benefit of the public, or if not used to this process, so I don't know.
You know, I think if there are some pieces, as we did with the evaluation, if there are some pieces from the self-assessment that you'd like to highlight, I think that might be good, and then I think probably we should spend a little bit more time talking about your goals.
Okay. Let me just share then what I wrote in for the benefit of the public who've not seen this this document yet. Just start me reading a little bit from the self-assessment. In reviewing the individual and collective performance reviews prepared by the Milford School Committee as presented publicly on September 6th, our last meeting, I'm appreciative of the opportunity to continue serving the town of Milford in my capacity as superintendent of schools, a position I've held now since 2007. The Milford Public Schools strategic plan, which is really what frames what's to come in this goal setting, plays a significant role as a driver for me as superintendent. It's the blueprint for aligning district, school, and educator goals so that all members of our school community direct their efforts toward the same teaching and learning goals and targeted outcomes. Framed by the DESE standards, Milford School, the strategic plan, and these are the bullet points that I want to emphasize, serves to ensure the district, Milford Schools, prioritize and make choices about what to do and what not to do in our schools. I want to help the district ensure that we're intentional rather than reactive in our instructional practices. I want to ensure accountability, commitment, and capability as the district works toward becoming a premier school district. Not an okay, not an adequate school district, a premier school district. I had an opportunity just to, if I can, anecdotally, I had a parent who came in my office today. I won't disclose who she is. Broke down several times in the conversation during my meeting with her meeting with me about how wonderful Milford has been to her family. She's a school choice family here, and she firmly believes that her children have overcome these special education hurdles because of the programs offered in Milford Public Schools. It was brought to tears several times during the meeting. You don't have the benefit of seeing those conversations. I do, and they're very touching. People don't often take the time. They'll put their complaints in writing. They often don't take the time to put the compliments in writing. And whenever we have opportunities, and there are many, it's important. And that, to me, suggests that we're on our way to being a premier school district, and I want to lead that charge. I want to ensure that district staff will have the training, the time, the resources, and the ongoing support to carry out their roles and responsibilities. It's very consistent with what's been said tonight about MIMSI and our commitment as a school district to provide the training our staff need, regardless of the outcome of a vote. We will not turn our backs on kids. It's not going to happen. We'll find a way. We've always found a way. I want to allow the district to marshal resources in order to fulfill the educational mission through effective working relationships and well-defined functions and tasks. What I list below this in the page, and I'll make it public on the district website, is really just some of the specific linkages to the goals that are set forth and how they link into the DESE model tool. But let me just move into the goal setting proposal.
I think it might be best, Bob, perhaps if we just take each goal. I mean, I only have a couple of comments on the goals, and if it pleases the committee, maybe if we have our questions or if we want to make modifications after Bob reviews the goal, we should handle them one at a time, as opposed to handling them all at the end, if that's okay with everyone.
So just deal with each item individually?
Yeah, so we'll start
Okay.
with goal one.
Okay, the first goal, professional practice, just as a background for the public, there's setting of professional practice goals, student learning goals. This is consistent all the way through for principals to do the same and for teachers to do the same for their students. Then what's different for me versus the others, there are district goals, and then there are specific, there are other goals, I try to be distinct whenever I can. I think I alluded to it the last time we met. There are certain functions of the job that shouldn't be considered goals. Balancing a school budget, presenting a school budget ought to be an expectation of my job. Working with Kathy, it's not something I should work toward. I mean, it's an expectation. Showing up to work every day for most people is an expectation. It's not a goal. It shouldn't be. Although for some, it may well be. I hope not in the Milford Schools. Professional practice goal. The Milford Schools Educator Evaluation System, and I spoke about this. This is really number one here, because this is, not only is it state required in 2013, 2014, which we are now one full year ahead of, and I won't editorialize all the way through like this. I want to just frame this way. It's not necessarily said this way. We are a full year ahead of the implementation. We're almost treating this district as a race to the top district who must be in compliance with the implementation by September. Most of the districts across the state are not in compliance with race to the top guidelines, which risks some federal funding, in fact. We are not a race to the top district. Nevertheless, we're treating ourselves as we are in terms of implementation so that we're a full year ahead to work out some of the kinks. Through this system, I will ensure the effective and timely supervision and evaluation of all staff in alignment with state regulations and contract provisions. That's important because the contract provisions may be slightly different, and that's allowable, locally negotiated, that's different from the state. And I referenced the standards there that are in the rubric, which you'll use that to assess me later. Consistent with the rollout process bargained in good faith between the Milford School Committee and the Milford Teachers Association, I will provide the necessary training and support for all Milford Public Schools teachers and administrators in the use of the new educator evaluation system, as evinced by the presentation of training documentation and as a function of the leadership team evaluation for the 2012-2013 academic year. But the evidence that I'll be putting together will be obviously agendas, training videos, anything that I've constructed related to this goal.
Any member comment?
So this year for that, is it just training on how to use the tool, or will you be using the tool to evaluate?
It's both. It's training and it's
On-the-job training?
On-the-job training.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is where we have the Teachers 21 consult work that we're doing, the data analysis work. You know, we're really refining. I'm really excited about the MCAS data analysis we're going to do this year and how we're going to go about that. It's really looking forward. It's really prospective as opposed to reacting to what kids did last year.
Right.
Now teachers are going to have in their hands their class list of their current kids and how they perform. This is exciting times to be doing data analysis, and man, I am psyched to be in charge of it. Okay, I really am taking the lead on this because it's going to give us for the first time some tremendous indicators. And if you've had a chance to see some of the preliminaries, just came out this week. There's a lot of hope here. There's a lot of glimmers of things that are going well, and we're going to begin to dig into that a lot more deeply. And I'll follow up the committee on those reports. But I digress. Yes, it is intended to be on-the-job training and to develop and training as we go, and really working. It's the spirit of this is to be collaborative. If the association finds that this is not so clear, then we need to make it more clear so that when it has to be in place the following school year, that we can have it in place correctly.
Well, you've had that collaboration and the tool's been developed, so that same team stays together throughout this time.
It does, yeah, and that's...
It's not just your leadership team, there's a team that's strictly for the evaluation tool.
That's correct, yep. And as I recall, we have to meet at least twice in the year
It's really
to
very
review
good.
and that sharing, I would hope would be even more frequent.
So, Bob, I just have a quick question for you. I appreciate the time that I'm just looking at the way it was put together at the time I know you put into this. So as I'm thinking a year ahead, how do I quantify how well you did this? Not just that it's done, but how well it was done.
There's not a standard by which, I suppose, I mean, if it were me looking at it, look at what has the state produced for training and then compare what is the training that I've done and compare that against the state model. There's not a specific rubric or a matrix that you can plug. I think you'd have to see it, watch the video. I did a webinar. It's going to be, in many of these instances, it's going to be a bit more objective, or subjective rather, and difficult to make it objective. But again, I guess if you use a benchmark of a state training module, or I'm not really sure. I guess if you find a way that you want me to make this a little bit more specific.
No, the reason why I asked the question is so again, I'm thinking ahead a year from now. So, and looking at the ratings at the top. So a year from now, we're going to have to evaluate as a committee and do a performance evaluation. Say, okay, so not just did you do it or did you not do it, but did you exceed it? We want to give you the opportunity to be able to do that. So we've got to have something that we're able to say, all right, here are the proof points that not only was it done, but that it was done expertly. So I'd want to have that opportunity to be able to say, all right, so here's what I can point to when I'm doing this evaluation.
If I can chime in, Scott, just a little bit, because this was one of the points that I had. I think this is a much more challenging goal than it's being sort of laid out as right now, because I think we all struggle through the 100-some-odd pages of evaluation documentation that comes, and I know that the teachers were delivered pretty much the same package. Here's 80 pages of information from the DESE. This is how we're going to evaluate you. Oh, by the way, figure out what your goals are. And so I think we're going to get a lot of feedback from teachers in this district if they don't feel like they're being supported in this process, that they're not being trained properly, that they don't understand what their goals are, I think we're gonna get a lot of feedback on this one.
And that's why I just,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm just trying to think forward to a year from now what this
Yeah,
is gonna look
it's
like.
a very, because I had the same question when I was reading it. I'm like, oh, okay, so he's gonna roll it out. And then I'm thinking, well, we had to have 4 meetings before we could even start to discuss how we're gonna actually do that process.
Yeah.
We have to schedule, meetings over the course of the year so we can stay in line with this timeline. So really, the teachers are actually going through the exact same process that we are right now. So I think this is, with 350 people, for whom this process must be done, I think this is a challenge.
This is a very challenging goal. It's the #1 goal, and I've invested all the principals in this with me. I can put specific, benchmarks or points in time, like by October I'll do this, or by December I'll do this.
I think that would help.
I will do that. But I've made some recalibrations along the way just based on feedback. For example, I had some members of the Teachers Association Executive Board who sat with me about some concerns about goal writing. So I reacted to that or I tried to work proactively with that to give them, to take the whole tool, the 80-some-odd page tool, and give them only the necessary first 3 things they would need in a small chunk to really make that. And then I gave them a very casual and linear webinar that I did. I recorded a 20-minute podcast that went through all the slides, just talking about this and trying to just reassure everybody it's going to be okay. We're going to work through this together, and that won't be reflective necessarily in my benchmarks, but may well prove out to be the exceeds, for example.
Yeah,
And it's an opportunity, to your point. So let me lay out at least some benchmark timeline over the course of the year, so we can see if we can hit those targets.
Perfect.
And that's a great point to bring up and to be aware of that now. The new evaluation tool allows for evidence to be listed that we'd want to see. So as we get a little bit more used to using the new tool as well, and you figuring out what it is that you can show us, we can more clearly document the evidence that will be used to determine if the goal has been met or not, or to what extent it has been met, so.
Okay. Right. Anything else on the professional practice goal?
Goal 2?
Okay, goal 2, the student learning goal. This is the Milford Public Schools Curriculum Committee. In accordance with Article 35 of the agreement between the Milford School Committee and the Milford Teachers Association as a function of the strategic plan, I will establish and lead the Milford Public Schools Curriculum Committee. In consultation with Teachers 21, who, as you know, I've referenced, I brought in a nonprofit professional development consultant organization who will assist me with developing a strong framework for curriculum coordination, instruction, and assessment review. I will meet monthly with the Curriculum Committee, charged with all matters of pre-K-12 curriculum, program coordination, and evaluation of all aspects of curriculum instruction and assessment. I will empower curriculum team leaders, CTLs, to fulfill the responsibilities of their positions. I will successfully lead the Milford Public Schools Curriculum Committee and provide strong rationale for the posting and hiring of an assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction and assessment in the FY 2014 budget presentation. And again, just the spirit of this goal was, as the committee's heard now a number of times, me taking a very hands-on approach to the curriculum to be a true curriculum leader, and that will really, to me, in the next couple of months, define the kind of person that I will need to bring onto this district to lead curriculum and instruction and assessment that has that background expertise in an area where I've seen firsthand the gaps and deficiencies in coordination that has to happen around professional development and curriculum work, and I've already uncovered a lot of that, and be able to hold that person then accountable to exactly what I'm viewing so that I can then tend to other needs of the district and not focus as much as I am a curriculum leader and will continue to have that responsibility. I can't reasonably expect that for the infinite future that any superintendent of schools, me or whomever, would have that responsibility solely. It's just, it's not the right thing for the district. And that's the spirit of why. So the proof of this would be, I suppose, the school committee seeing the need, the rationale, and having that been explained clearly as part of the budget would prove that that's been met. But again, I'm happy to take comments or make it more specific if need be. Okay.
Goal 3, Bob?
These are district improvement goals. The first is data analysis. And again, a lot of these do link, although they are somewhat separate. I will meet weekly with our data specialist to pull teacher reports on student performance outcomes as a catalyst for data-driven discussions with principals as they assess educator effectiveness at the building level. I will post monthly curriculum reports on the Milford Public Schools website, which highlight data analysis efforts as revealed during curriculum committee meetings as evidence of work toward this goal. If I do this correctly, your work should be able to sit down and look at our website and see everything there, neatly pressed and folded, and as can anybody in Milford. And I hope they would look at that.
I am as excited about this as I have been over anything that I've been exposed to since I've been on this committee, where we now have the tools to really do an appropriate data analysis. I mean, the methodology that we were using before as someone who works in data analysis was beyond impractical, you know, comparing grade to grade as opposed to cohort of students, you know, amongst the cohort. It never made any sense to me, and I think that this is gonna pay huge dividends. I hope it's gonna pay huge dividends.
It's also very important that most people count. Accountability is a big issue today.
As I, well, speaking of that, as I look at this and I see, I will meet weekly, there may be those instances where the data specialist isn't available or there's not a school vacation week. So do I need to you know, again, I ask because, you know, yeah, okay. I mean, I don't have a problem there, but you'd hate to open myself up for critiques. Well, you said weekly.
No, that's silly.
You know, I could say weekly, you know, whenever possible, but I don't want to suggest that the intention is that it is weekly. And so whenever possible, okay. So I'll leave it just the way it's written, and I'll ask for you to humor me on that one.
We'll let you know.
All right, let me know. Yeah, let me know. Let me know.
Paul?
Yeah, Patrick, thank you. Just a comment on that too, Bob. I think that's a great goal, and like we mentioned before,
But the data teams,
some of these goals, you know, should be not only brought from administration, but from administration to the classrooms. And I think that's a great way to do it. And one of the things that I could think maybe is probably combine this goal with the previous goal with the curriculum, where a lot of the information you're going to get from this could probably be incorporated into the curriculum, so these children have the constant awareness and, you know, in the constant review of questions that could be on a statewide test.
that's right. They are absolutely connected. And the only reason I made them distinct was I wanted to make sure the committee knew that I was doing this, that I was holding true to the, you know, that it was measurable, that I had these goals, these meetings set specifically on data, but I will be linking that, because I view the curriculum committee work, as much as it is driven by the data, that is so much more organizational and just bringing people in and coordinating. So when a budget presentation comes forward, for example, around textbooks, you have the confidence in a budget that's saying, we know we have $400,000 of textbook needs, but we realize that the first $50,000 is really and truly the priority for the Milford schools, that you have that confidence. And I can tell you that yes, we've vetted this thing fully, and you'll hear that from me. So I view that more, that will come as an outgrowth of the curriculum committee, where this is going to be a specific data goal for me, and that will really narrow my focus to looking at data. And I believe, Paul, it was your suggestion in a prior year to have a data team. And in fact, on this, I do have a data team. Right now, I've brought into the loop on this our English Language Learner Program Director, Jen Lancaster, Meg Belcito, Special Education, and we'll be bringing Patty Kelly, Title I, who oversees, those are our sort of our higher risk population groups. And I think it's most important that we really isolate that group of students right now at the start of this. We'll begin to widen that, the birth of that as we go.
Very good, thank you.
Are there any further comments or questions or clarifications on data analysis? Okay, very good. Moving right along, standards-based report card. This is a huge undertaking. This is going to be a great measure for us. This is going to be a difficult one for us to roll out on time, because we're dependent on a lot of other variables which are beyond my control. But we are working with.
Adjust your expectations now, Bob.
I'm trying to give myself an out, because there's the X2. We use the student. Let me read the goal, then I'll explain. So, get myself ahead of myself. By October 1st, 2012, which is like in days from now, I will have led the development and implementation of a standards-based report card, K through 4, to replace outdated carbon copy report cards with current standards-based electronic reporting to better track student performance in a K-12 electronic database and reduce paper consumption. So all the moving parts to this concept is around our student information management system, X2. So there's workflows that have to happen, and costs associated with workflows, and custom designing, and making sure that we have an agreed-upon rubric that the teachers have buy-in on, and the scoring mechanisms, and information to families so they understand. And we only have a trimester to work within, and we have to have this, because if we miss a target, then I'm laughing, because I can see myself going to Kathy saying, Kathy, remember those carbon copy report cards I said I didn't need? We're gonna have to get them, overnight. So the hang-up on this one is we believe on our end, technology aside, that we have this tool's ready to go. We have teachers that have vetted this. We've had a curriculum committee that's met all summer long. Maggie Chinese has assisted me, who's done curriculum work before, standards-based report card design work before. I have every confidence in that. Where some of my concerns about the October 1st, which I might have to modify, is that if X2 can't deliver on their part of the technological side in terms of rolling this out, it will reflect as though our end wasn't in place, and that's not the case. So we believe we've talked to them at length, our chief technology officers involved, all the right players are at the table. There's been timelines established. Everything would lead me to believe we'll be well on time for the first trimester. But there's a training curve to this. Teachers have to know how to implement this information into the, it's not a real steep learning curve on this, but teachers having to use the X2 system as opposed to using a handwritten report card. The committee may, and just to give you another example of a small cog in the engine that, that I'm trying not to miss, is there was a negotiated language about a standing technology review committee, if you recall this from the contract language. And you're on that committee. So trying to be mindful of every possible pitfall to roll this out. I called that group together to say, hey, you're on notice, this is what we're looking to do, it has technological application. I don't view this as that it's going to be a change of working condition in any way. But I'm making sure that you're on notice that this is coming forward. There's no pushback whatsoever on that in the spirit of cooperation. But it's all those little pieces that, and it would probably be in my best interest, actually, to spell all those out. So you know the work that's been involved to do this, what seems to be a very simple goal.
I think that it may be helpful, just insofar as we don't want people to think that perhaps you're blaming the hammer because the nail wasn't driven in properly. Really, the X2 is a tool. It's a complicated tool. And so there are a lot of moving parts there. Christine? Oh, Christine.
So I guess what I am kind of hearing is that there is a new report card that's drafted, that's accepted by your teachers in a buy-in, that's a much better the report card than, what we had before, that are realistic benchmarks. So a parent can read the report card and say, okay, my child is at this math level in second, like a realistic report card. That's already done.
That's linked to the state standards, Common Core linked, yeah.
But it's
We're there.
done?
That's done.
And it's approved by the faculty that are going to use it.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's right.
So that's why I think what you just said is incredibly important for this goal, is that we have those steps that have been completed, because right now, I don't necessarily get this here, and from what you said, it's not, that, like, Patrick, it's just a machine part, what is this goal then? There are important pieces to that goal. The big one is that there is a report card out there that should be working, and now we need to get those things in place quickly.
Yeah, so let me rework these, and I'll list those separate efforts,
Yeah.
and even put some target dates around those, so that if for example, the hammer is not nailing
So
the
what
way it ought to be,
happens? Right.
that we know who's holding it.
Scott?
I would even say, with the delivery dates, I think it's important to have those benchmarks in there, as you just said. And again, I would, not that I'm looking for you to push it out, but I would say, under promise and over deliver. So if you set a time frame of, if you think you can get it done by October 1st and you set a date of October 15th and deliver on the 1st, you're a hero. If you set a date of October 1st, you deliver on October 2nd, you missed a deadline.
We see in August, that seems very reasonable.
Well,
Right.
when do the first report cards go out? Mid-year, correct? If at that level.
I'm sure it'll
So-
leave enough lead time so that we're not, because by October, we have to really be ordering, if we have to go to Plan B, and there always ought to be one,
That was
and
good.
through a safety net, that we've got to have an order in for these triplicate report cards. So,
what to do.
but I'll talk to Kathy too and see what the absolute drop dead deadline is on that, just to have that safety net, and realistically, if I like that, if I can over-deliver, under-promise and over-deliver, I'm gonna note that one.
That's what we're trying to do in this work.
All right.
Don?
Is this system any different than the one that we use for 5 through 12?
Well, yeah, slightly. In some respect, well, in terms of,
Would be the X2.
Well, he's talking about report card thing for K through 4, right?
yes, in middle grades 5 through 12 already uses X2
All right.
for report cards. You're already familiar, as a parent who has a middle school age child, you're already familiar with There's going to be alignment that's going to happen as we go. See, the problem with secondary level curriculum is that there's still not even agreement. Like, for example, science hasn't been touched, but math and English language arts are well on their way. Elementary has a separate set of standards that are in balance, but we're reporting it on a 10-year-old document.
Yeah.
So it's not truly reflective of the standards today.
The reason why I'm asking is this is an extension of an existing system.
It's a complete
It's a
modification.
software rollout, right? To me, I just looked at this goal, when I went through this, and I looked at this as, oh, this is a good goal for Len, because, it's a software rollout, and there needs to be training on the software. I'm just being honest, I didn't look at this as one of your top 5 goals of the 2012-2013 year. I know you have some other goals at the bottom, and to me, when I went through this, I thought, wow, number 6 is much more important than number 4. And I don't know if it means anything in the order of this or whatever it is, but to me, it's a software, we're changing a system, there are a lot of other people involved other than you. This is really something that Len really needs to be driving. I know you're overseeing it, but I wouldn't put this in, this is again my opinion, top 5 goals for our superintendent for the upcoming school year. It's my opinion.
My reaction to that, and I appreciate the technological side of it is one small aspect. Connecting the X2 to do what it needs to do so teachers can report to families with accuracy what's happening in the classroom is an aspect. It's the bigger connection to are we linked to the right standards? Are we reporting? So it's not so much the technical side of it that has to happen, and Len's already involved with that, and people at X2 are involved. It's way over my head. My concern is making sure that we're actually reporting to families what we're teaching in classes. And that's where I see that I have a pivotal role in making sure this is aligned. Because if it's not telling the right story about what's happening in classrooms, we're not giving parents anything that's useful. So whether you view it at the top where it ought to be there, we can certainly move it. But I viewed it, I just compartmentalized it, data, the report carding driven by data, which all links back to the curriculum goal. But I'm agreeable. I think it ought to appear on there someplace. I think it's an important work that I'm spending time doing. But if you think it should appear elsewhere, if the committee feels that, I didn't look at the numbers as being sort of priorities. I view the numbers as being, there are 3 district improvement goals. There's 1 professional practice goal, 1 student learning goal, but the numbers to me were really less relevant than the focus. But I'm happy to move it around or.
I expect you to meet each of these goals. I give equal weight to every single one of them, so I don't disagree with you, Don. I want to see the benchmarking because I want to know what more is involved in that, because I think, to Don's point, this is something that we've been doing for higher grades. So I think the benchmarking will help lay that a little bit better, but I want you to meet each of these goals. I don't think that there's anyone that, at least in my opinion, I don't think there's anyone that I think is less
So I
important.
laid these out in terms of numerical, of what I might get to or not get to. I think they're all important and they're all a priority. I just had to group, this is just really the formatting that the DESE provided. Yeah. But number 7 will be a goal that I'll review that. So, and then the questions, and again, I'll go back and I'll modify these for the committee, for myself and the committee, with the specific delivery deadlines and benchmarks.
So Bob, maybe to John's point, I think that this is a very important piece of curriculum because it's been lacking in the district, how a parent can evaluate a K through 4, how they're being, in the past you get, oh yeah, satisfactory, developing, that drives me insane. So this is a very important piece, but I think what you don't articulate in here is that component of it and how it is so tied into curriculum. Because I think that, on a superficial level, it sounds like, oh, it's all done, let's just make sure we get all the pieces in place so we can roll it out. But really, the big role for you is the tie-in to the curriculum and how the standards have changed. And so now, as a district, we're more accountable to that standard.
Well stated.
So that, if that can be incorporated in the language, I think that's much more of a curriculum development goal.
Excellent. By the way, I like this process much better than prior processes for goal setting.
Dialogue.
I think this is just fabulous. Managing conflict. This is goal number, district improvement goal. I'm not sure where to warehouse this one, but this is where I put it. Managing conflict. In response to the end of the cycle of that summative evaluation report presented by the Milford School Committee on September 6, 2012, I will work to better employ strategies for responding to disagreement and dissent, constructively resolving conflict, and building consensus throughout the Milford Public Schools. I linked it to the appropriate standards in the DESE tool, and I'll do that by seeking out and attending training before December 31st, 2012, to help me better manage conflict in my capacity as superintendent of the Milford Public Schools. And again, it's in response to feedback from the committee, and I try to generalize as many of the comments from the individual reports, my own personal self-assessment, and to map it. And unless it's something that the committee feels otherwise, that came across as an area of concern for some, if not most.
I like you were specific, you told us what the goal was, you told us how you're gonna do it. I thought that was good. The only thing I'm thinking is the proof will be in the pudding. It's the first test. I mean, that's ultimately what it's gonna
Well,
be.
yeah.
And it's not something you can put in your goal. But I actually appreciate the fact you said this is what, you laid it out very specifically. I guess my only other question I would add on to that is it says that you're gonna seek out and attend training before December 31st. If you've done any groundwork or legwork on what those training 1, 2, whatever that is, if you can spell out, and the more specific you can be on, I've identified these 2 courses, I'm going to be taking them, I've enrolled in them, and the more specific you can be, I think that will help us, number one, give us a better appreciation of what you've, kind of how you've learned and how you've developed yourself in that area, and number 2, what we can set for clear expectations for success.
I think also, Walter, you can do as the year goes on, just a couple of examples and just hold them. Document the examples of what happened, how it, how you got everybody to the table, how it got handled, how it got resolved, just so you have, if
Sure.
we would like to see, 2 or 3 examples of conflict that happened during the school year, and how did you, as a manager, how did you handle it?
I'm sure that won't be a problem to give you enough conflict. And to be perfectly realistic, this may well turn out that I didn't meet the goal. I mean, I'll do everything I can to head off conflict. But as you know, tonight was an example. This conflict will happen with MIMSI, or invariably it's in the nature of life.
Right.
Well, that's why I
To
think
the
it's
extent that I can
management, not
manage it.
avoidance.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Christine?
And I can only speak for me, but part of this is that we know that you're managing conflict behind the doors, but sometimes that outspoken, listen, I'm the superintendent, this is how I feel, I've done my homework X, Y, and Z, and this is why that decision was made, goes a long way. And I think in past, some of the very public situations we've had would have benefited from that kind of, this is how the conflict resolved, as superintendent, this is how I feel. And then we can rally, or one way or the other. But it's difficult when the superintendent isn't taking that kind of very public, I'm the leader, I'm the, and that's just my
Yeah.
personal
No,
opinion. And
I
having seen
I
it
respect
now in
that.
several occasions, I don't doubt that behind the doors that may be what's happening, but it doesn't feel that way sometimes. And that, I think, is incredibly important as leader. As you come more and more into the leader of the district, let's stand on our pulpit
it's a
and be
point
that
well
leader.
taken. Again, for in my own self-defense, that you're right. There's a lot of situations where the conflict is managed, and it's not brought into the public eye. There's times the conflict is brought to the public eye, and where I think what I'm hearing is that I could take a firmer stand on how it's been addressed in the public eye to head off
Absolutely.
future dialogue, and that point is taken.
The dialogue,
But
exactly.
I don't want to suggest to anybody that I've just, run away from conflict, or, 'cause I've often created a fair amount of it myself.
That comes out,
as it
like that
turns
you
out.
haven't run away, but it just take
Right.
it bull by the horns.
I mean, first of all, everyone sitting in this room evaluated you. Many people mention this particular point. And so, I mean, I think that you've gotten the feedback on it. I think, in my mind, the training is great. Training isn't the goal, though. The training is it's behavioral. And I think that a lot of the people that spoke about managing conflict and taking a firmer stance, strike that. I think everyone that talked about conflict talked about taking a firmer stance and making decisions that you believe are right because you believe they're right, and convincing us that you did that. And so it's not about you feeling you have to justify what you did. This is why I did it. I did it because I wanted it done this way, and if you don't like that, then we can fight about it. But this is why I did it, and I think that was the type of conflict management that a lot of us were looking for. I think, I mean, I don't wanna.
Yeah, I'm clear on that now. I'll modify
That's
that.
part of management. You can get involved in a situation of conflict, and you're not gonna go in the direction of what caused the conflict. You're gonna stand your ground and say, I'm sorry that you don't agree with me on this, but this is how it's being handled.
Yeah, and I will, many of you in the room have come from private, not to remind you of that, from private industry, different kinds of industry where standards are a little different or behaviors are a little different. They're not necessarily bound by contract language and due process kinds of things. It's a little bit different in the business side of it. So I'm happy to revise this in such a way that shows that I'm taking a strong position that defends how I did it and why, without the training being a way to get there. But that's secondary to the actual goal.
Yeah. I personally don't feel that revision is necessary. I wanted to make sure that I was at least expressing clearly how I felt and
Oh, yeah,
how I think many members felt. Yeah.
I think the way I'll clean this up will make sense in terms of structural, and it'll make it easier in the end, I think, to go back and link this up to, did he do it or did he not do it? Make it less subjective. Any other comments on managing conflict? If I manage this conflict, okay, it's fine. All right.
Well, this wasn't a conflict.
No, I know, I've been on the other side of conflict.
It's like saying grass is a conflict with a lawnmower.
That's powerful. Huh?
Yeah. Hammer and nail, grass and lawnmower. I'm folding tonight.
Yeah, you are. Full of them. Other goals, number 6, Woodland Elementary School project. And not to make this minimal because it's at the bottom, I'm now part of a school building committee. It's not something that I'm necessarily leading by myself any longer. Up until now, statement of interest submissions to the MSBA had been my responsibility solely, and now we have a school building committee that's taking on that work. But I'm still, as the goal states, I'll continue to serve as an active member of the Milford School Building Committee as we advance the Woodland Elementary School Building project and meet all deadlines established by the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
So do you go to all the meetings?
I do.
You have school representation at all the meetings?
Yeah, I'm at all the meetings, yeah. Rob Quinn,
Right.
Greg Zigley, Alex Emision, Patrick is the school committee member. Yeah, I'm at all the meetings.
Okay.
And finally, communication with the Milford School Committee. In an effort to strengthen communication between the superintendent of schools and the Milford School Committee, I will block time each week for the purpose of making personal contact via telephone or personal meetings with each member of the Milford School Committee. And I started to do this already, even before I lay this goal out tonight, and hopefully you've seen that or experienced that firsthand.
Yeah, no. I was glad you brought it up earlier when you differentiated between goals and expectations with respect to the budget. And not to put too fine a point on it, but this is an expectation of mine, quite frankly. I'd like to see it on here. I would agree with leaving it on here. Again, you put some time frames around it, weekly. Again, if it's, I'm not gonna get my calendar out and check it out weekly, but it's good to see it on there.
Scott, Mike.
Yeah, I already have it on my calendar, so that's fine. Yeah, I'm certainly echo any of all of Robbie's comments, which is, this I definitely would put under, this is more of a routine rather than what I would say is a goal. I think about how this aligns with the other components of this document. I would agree. I would put this in, and you've put it very well earlier. This is an expectation. So again, I think it was definitely something that came out and through the evaluation process as an opportunity for you. I'm glad that you're developing it. But I want to make sure that my voice is heard as well, and it's loud and clear, and I think it is, this is a routine and an expectation that.
Sure. And again,
I'm glad to see
it appears here because, like budget last year, was the school committee had more specific, they wanted to see a more specific process. Now that I understand that that's the committee's standard for expectations, that just becomes institutionalized as behavior. And the same here, I would expect this wouldn't be there next year because you'll have established a
Yeah, you've got a good routine in place. And
routine.
Well, even earlier, and I hate to keep going back to the MIMSI discussion, but, even to have heard about that a little bit maybe during the summer, as opposed to having just seen it on the agenda. Would have been good to know, maybe we could have gotten a little bit more collaboration going at the time. Maybe not, but again, I don't think it certainly would not have hurt to know what was going on there.
Okay.
So I'll go back and rework these with the feedback from tonight, and I'll submit it to, I don't know if you want to do another meeting agenda
Well,
on it, or just
I was gonna say, I mean, I think that we have to vote to accept these goals or not. And so really, the notes that I have is for goal labeled number 1, although we know it's not the first goal. We just want some benchmarking on the steps that will be taken in the educator evaluation process, giving some evidence, podcasts, things like that. For goal that's labeled number 4, similar benchmarking to explain more about how the curriculum piece is tying into how the X2 software is being used. For managing conflict, I mean, I don't think that anyone really thought that changes were necessary there. So I don't know that we need to meet on these again unless there's a member that wants to see those revisions first. I think it would make sense if someone was prepared to make a motion. It's a motion from Scott.
I would say I'd make a motion providing, obviously allowing the provision that these adjustments are made as were stated earlier.
I have a second from Rob on that motion. All in favor of accepting the goals? Opposed? Not opposed, unanimous in favor. The goals for the 2012-2013 school year for the superintendent of schools have been accepted by the school committee.
Thank you very much.
And so I guess we have some good news now, Bob, on the French program at the Stacy School.
Yes, just as a follow-up, you recall some parents and some concern about the French program, grade 7. Last year around the time of budget, there was never, just to be clear, there was never any intention of us not liking the program or believing in the program or not wanting French or having opportunities for kids to learn languages. I mean, I've heard every variation of the story. Fact of the matter was enrollment was low. We couldn't justify running a course given that enrollment. Principals were faced with difficult decisions around budget cuts, around $600,000 in reduction, and unfortunately, some of those departments fell victim to the budget. Nevertheless, I committed to the school committee, as I did to those families that sat here last spring, that I would look and see whatever stones I could overturn to find some solutions, and gave a lot of thought to that, worked with Kathy, worked with Nancy, and Nancy with her team, and pleased to report that we did another survey. We just saw a survey at the end of last year about student interest. We did that again, saying if we were able to bring back, and some of you may have seen that with your own children, if we were able to bring back French, would you have an interest? Spelled it out for them, and of the responses we got back, it was about 25 families that truly had an interest in, because their children would want to continue that program of study. Again, 25 in an entire grade 7 it only further proves that we did what we believed to do for the right reason based on enrollment. That said, if we can accommodate the interest of 25, wouldn't that be great? So we went and we did the brainstorming and put it in I'm pleased to report that not only did we find a candidate, we certified both in French and I believe in Italian, who's got the flexibility to be a part-time employee, because this is now going to be in a schedule during the school day, so the students who had Spanish now can take French, and now we can pull them out of Spanish into French, and that's complicated because the schedule changes, frequently. It's not like it's the same time, so somebody who's a working professional. So we reached out to folks that we thought, retirees that had the licensing. They weren't interested in having a schedule that was going to be like this every day. We found somebody, and we're now going to roll out and deal with the next steps of how to make that schedule work to minimize the transitions for the students and get that into place. So we're well on our way, and I'm very pleased to report that I'm pleased to report, and being more convicted as a leader, to say we took this by the horns, we delivered, I delivered with our team on this for the school committee, for those families, and for those students.
Nice job.
And it
Christine?
starts Monday, right?
I believe it does.
So the kids will be French.
So I wish the parents would
Thanks.
be
Heard it from the
tonight to be part of that celebration, but I am pleased to report that. A glimmer of good news tonight.
Yep, good job.
That's great.
Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you.
Well, nicely done, Bob. You came into a very creative solution to a challenging problem that was based on a financial decision and ultimately based on public outcry. We did exactly what should be done. Served the community. Nice job.
Thanks. I'm all done.
The next item on our agenda is the report of the Assistant Superintendent for Business and Human Resources.
I have for the committee's approval this evening 7 warrants. The first warrant is in the amount of $206,807.62.
I have a motion from Dawn, a second from Mike. All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous? In favor? Motion carries.
The second warrant is in the amount of $178,874.47.
We have a motion from Rob, a second from Christine. All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous? In favor? The motion carries.
The third warrant is in the amount of $22,087.27.
Motion from Scott, second from Paul. All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous? In favor? Motion carries.
The fourth warrant is in the amount of $235,179.58.
Motion from Mike, second from Dawn. All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous? In favor? The motion carries.
The fifth warrant is in the amount of $29,290.92.
Motion from Christine, second from Rob. All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous? In favor? The motion carries.
Sixth warrant is in the amount of $7,986.84.
Motion from Paul, second from Scott. All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous? In favor? The motion carries.
And the last warrant is in the amount of $140,108.28.
Motion from Dawn, second from Mike. All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous? In favor? The motion carries.
I also have for the committee a list of the latest appointments and hires from our last meeting. No vote is required. I do have a list of course reimbursement approval in the amount of $37,621.37. And a vote is required.
I'm ashamed to say I didn't actually look at this in the packet, so I have to look at it before I vote on it.
I just have to ask the question, Bob, you looked at these to make sure that the course reimbursements are all aligned in,
The new
Yes.
contract.
It's the new contract.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
it's all
you.
within the contract.
Thank you.
So I have a motion from Scott, second from Paul. All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous? In favor? The motion carries.
I'm happy to say the monthly update is where we need to be for the month of September. There are no budget crises or surprises. There is a junior I was going to say, don't do that to me, Mike. I do have for the committee the Milford High School vending machine allocation in the amount of $19,900 from the high school principal, and I do want to just make a note of mention. Last year's request to the committee for approval was in the amount of $23,350, and I just wanted to explain the difference, just to be clear, that the year before last, included in the $23,350, was a carryover from the year before, which the committee reallocated, and that was in the amount of $1,500. This year's carryover from FY12 going into 13 is only $600, so there's a little difference there in case you're wondering, as well as the spring warrant that went to the town meeting for the request to replenish the vending machine did not include the month of March, where the year before it did. So that being said, we are a little behind in our revenue of $1,000, but I do believe that's more than likely attributed to not the percent. Our commission is the same, but the A list is in the vending machine, so there's a little different of a choice for food.
Yes, that's right.
The healthy choices, and as well as, exactly, just, overall economy. I don't know how much extra money kids have for the vending machine. So that being said, Mike Tempesta did make a request to the committee in the amount of $19,900 for your approval to allocate those mini grants to all that applied.
Any members have any comments or? It's a motion from Mike, second from Dawn. All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous? In favor? The motion carries.
There are two gifts.
We do have some gifts. The first gift is from the Middlesex Savings Bank. It's for teacher and curriculum development in the amount of $1,250. It's a very generous gift. We thank them. And the Family Network Project. This is the Family Network gift for playgroups, parent workshops, and programs. in the amount of $1,860, another very generous gift. I have a motion from Rob, a second from Christine to accept these gifts, both gifts. All in favor? Opposed, unanimous in favor, the motion carries. Bob, please make sure that we send out thanks, appropriate thanks. The next item on our agenda are subcommittee updates. Did the policy subcommittee have an update that they wanted to share?
We have a meeting next week.
Wonderful.
Which, actually,
We do?
after our meeting, after the presentation
Shall be
by
posted.
The attorney,
It's
we need to have
posted.
posted by
Yeah,
tomorrow.
sure.
Oh, it is
Yeah,
posted
I've
already,
already
all right,
signed it.
perfect.
Yep.
All right, good, because it's,
Yep.
tomorrow's 48 hours, because you can't include weekends.
And did the safety and security subcommittee have an update?
This is posted for the second.
Very good. Yes,
Sick leave bank, would you like to make
Oh.
an offer
yes,
to the committee?
yes.
We do have a request, so I do need to convene.
Yeah, we will need a member to serve on the sick bank. It formerly was me, and so I would like to appoint another member to take that over. We do have a request. Is there any member that would volunteer to serve on the sick bank?
What does it entail?
As need comes, Paul? I saw Paul put his hand up.
Yeah,
Is
because
that?
I believe I served on it prior to you, then when I was chairman, I turned it
Yeah,
over to you.
I served on it for 2 years. I
Yeah.
think we've met 4 times. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not good to meet, and fortunately, we don't meet very often, so, so Paul, thank you.
I'll do it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah, I
you.
appreciate it. And next item on our agenda is new business. Does any member have new business?
I kind of do. Stacy, phys ed teacher position was part of our cuts last year. I'm hearing class sizes are quite large, and kids aren't happy because they can't do certain things that they were allowed to do last year. One thing I hear particularly about is this Presidential Fitness Award Program, which really motivated kids last year. I mean, now now I've had 3 in the school, it motivates kids, and they all talk about it. So I think I'd like Nancy to make sure that's still happening. There's equipment they can't use because they say there's too many kids in the class. That shouldn't be happening. Because Nancy was very confident that it wouldn't change any of what phys ed delivered, and it's a really important part of the day. So the kids just need to get some energy out and exercise, and so I just want to make sure if the classes are big, that they're still being organized in such a way that it's not detrimental to programs that are important.
Just to respond to that, Christine, Nancy's well aware of that. We're actually working with there's been a little bit of a push from the Teachers Association on this one around those 2 exact areas, the presidential fitness. The second area is the rock climbing wall, which is, I think, we were talking about for equipment, which requires 3 PE teachers to be present or 3 staff members to be present. There's specific language in the contract that forbids the use of volunteer substitutes and so forth to be a third person. A suggestion I put forward there with talking with Nancy, and Nancy is working toward resolution on that. So you have confidence there. And the resolution now looking to do is, for example, an applied physical education teacher is a PE teacher, is district-wide, and can be scheduled to be there to be the third person. So think, like the French program, there are some creative ways to get around some of these pitfalls.
Just want to make sure it gets out there.
Yeah.
Bob, even just with that, the other thing, and I'm glad you're using the creativity on that, also, in many of those gym classes, there's also paraprofessionals that are available. I don't
It
know if
isn't-
that's something that's a restriction, because I know in the past.
It is.
They've been able to, no?
There's some pretty tough limitations that but you know what, we'll find a
figure it
way.
out.
We'll find a way.
Okay. Thanks, Bob.
But I'll get back to you on as that progresses.
Yeah, that was one of the.
Does any member have old business?
Just to follow up from a conversation that we had at our last meeting, Bob, I know that we had talked about from a policy subcommittee, and we are meeting obviously on Monday of next week. I asked that you begin to solicit feedback from teachers as well as administrators when we think about the policies and what is, as we begin to prioritize our list for this school year, getting feedback from them of what policies may get in their way or make what we can, begin to evaluate first as we prioritize that. Can you give a quick update on that, please?
Sure, I've started
Thank you.
to collect that. Going to the schools and getting that face time with the teachers has been, I think I had given some thought to giving out a general survey or sending an email out, but I really believe the most honest responses from teachers about what's getting in the way of getting the job done is done face-to-face. So the reach there for me is, I've asked all the principals to provide me with class lists, provide me with, not class lists, with staff rosters in their room locations. So as I go to a school, if I'm walking to Woodland School, I'm going to go to Woodland School, and I'm going to just put a check mark in the box of teachers that I've made FaceTime with. And as I talk to them, I asked them this question, is, what can we do to improve? Where are there policy or procedural hang-ups that are they're really getting in the way of getting the job done, and how can we address those? So that's become the framework of the conversation that I'm having one-to-one. So it will take some time, but I would expect, in my mind, by Thanksgiving, I'll have had a chance to get to most, if not all, of the district staff to get that kind of direct feedback. And then I'll compile that and report back to the committee as to whether it's not more, if it's more procedural, more policy, or maybe more contractual, or it could just be the challenges of teaching in Milford.
I keep hearing how the bleachers were bent because the students were cheering like crazy at the football game, and, I just wanted to get out there, there wasn't a fault of our students, that those bleachers are going to be replaced. It was a defect in the bleachers, from what I understand. But I've heard it from multiple people, like, oh my gosh, or, did we buy cheap equipment? No, it's going to be taken care of. So if that can just get out there publicly, that would be great.
As well.
Yes.
And I know they've already closed them off and are working on with Eric, I guess, to correct these. Kids all over the country stand on bleachers and do what our kids do. And to have them, and I haven't actually seen the SAG on them, but I did talk to Rich Krigostavo on Saturday about it at the field. And, yeah, he was, yeah. Go Scarlet Hawks.
Any other member of old business? So we will have an executive session this evening.
I just missed a call from Jerry, so excuse me 1 second.
The executive session will be for the purpose of ongoing contract discussions over the superintendent's renewal. Discussion of these negotiations in open session could have a detrimental effect on the position of the body, and so therefore we shall go into an executive session tonight. We will not be returning. Please, Erica, have that reflected in the minutes. If I could have a motion from Dawn to enter executive session, second from Mike, we would need a roll call, a voice roll call.
Yes.
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 And yes. Thank you very much.